So I just got to make sure my husband's okay.
All right. Good morning. We're going to go ahead and start our work session for November 10th, 2015. I just want to make a couple of announcements. Commissioner Carolyn Mason in Sarasota had an accident. She is recovering. She had a slip and fall accident, and so we need to keep her in our prayers. Also, Carol's husband, Andre, is back in the hospital, so we need to keep him in our prayers. So thinking of those folks this morning as we go into our work session. We'll go ahead and start. I'll turn this over to staff. The morning work session topic is on impact fee study. Dan, I guess you're going to start it off.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, Commissioners. Dan Slant, Deputy County Administrator. Today is a work session on impact fees. There's no action required of the board. I thought first I'd go through a little bit of the history and background of where we are in the process. We contracted with Tischler Bice to prepare an impact fee study update for us. It's been a number of years since we did our last one. They presented that study in a work session on October 13th. And at that time, we put the study up on our website and made it available to the public.
Madam Chair, I don't
Madam
think
Chairman.
it's my voice. I can't hear.
No, it seems
We're having
loud.
some problems with audio.
Oh, good. It's not
Oh,
just
okay.
me.
I think you just need to get it closer.
No,
Oh,
No,
can you hear him?
and
Is it making noise?
do a test.
Test? Test?
No,
No.
it's not working.
It's just me.
We're just not hearing what you're saying.
That one works
Yeah.
better.
yes, that is much better.
Would you like me to start over? Okay.
Chris to the rescue.
All right.
And they could hear Betsy before, right?
Okay. This morning, this is a work session on impact fees. There's no action required of the board. To start out, I'd like to go through a little bit of the background and history of where we are in the process. We contracted with Tischler Bice to update our impact fee study. It's been a number of years since we last had one done. Tischler Bice and staff presented that study in a work session on October 13th. And at that time, we put the study up on the website and made it available to the public. On impact fees, just a couple of little reminders. They are fees that are charged on new development. They are not charged to existing property owners. They can only be used for capacity-related infrastructure improvements. They cannot be used for operations. They can't be used to fix and replace existing assets and infrastructure. As I think you all know, the school board has also been going through a process pretty much concurrently with our process. They are looking to reinstate their impact fee possibly, and it has been not being collected for the last few years. Our interlocal agreement with the school board requires that if they want us, the county, to impose an impact fee for schools, they need to adopt a resolution that submits their study to the county and also recommends that a fee be imposed. And it's our understanding that on the school board's agenda for this evening, they have a resolution that would transmit that study and request that impact fees for schools be imposed at initially 50% of the maximum allowable amount per their study, rising to 75% after 1 year and to 100% after 2 years. It's our understanding that's on their agenda for tonight. As you might expect, the discussions on impacts fees has raised quite a bit of comment and concerns and issues in the community. We have been talking to a lot of folks in the intervening time since October 13. We've talked with commissioners, with business folks, with committees on the Manatee Chamber of Commerce, with economic development folks, with the business, with the development and building community, and school board administration and staff. So there's been a whole lot of discussion that's going forward, and some of our presentation that we're about to make today reflects some of those conversations that we've been having. If we could get the slides up, please. All right. There. The first thing that we wanted to do was go through a comparison, and I need to copy here so I can see. Comparisons on impact fees used to be relatively simple. They've gotten a little more complex and a little more convoluted. So what we've had staff go through, and I think they've done a really good job of trying to put this in a context that we can look at it and get some valid comparisons. As I think probably you have recognized over the last few years, as impact fee studies have been redone around the state, folks have sometimes imposed different fees geographically, imposed different fees based on certain conditions and things like that. So in a lot of counties, there are different impact fees based on those things. So that what we've done and tried to do in these comparisons is provide what the lowest impact fee in that county would be and what the highest would be. And there can be all kinds of permutations and combinations in between those 2 points. But I think it gives you a pretty good idea of how they stack up. The Manatee County proposed fee is the same way. For the first time, we have 4 geographical districts in transportation with different fees depending on the district. So we have that same situation in what we've proposed as well. So you'll see that with the lowest and the highest proposed fees. So if we take a look at this first one, this is a single-family detached home, 3 bedrooms, approximately 2,000 square feet. What we've done is we picked a few of the selected land use categories to show you as comparisons. We have about probably 15 different categories. We've chosen the single-family detached house and then a few of the commercial activity-related land uses as well. So this first one is for a single-family detached. I'd like to take a little time here and go a little slow because it's a little hard to follow this. So what we've done is we've chosen counties that are pretty much the west coast of Florida counties surrounding Manatee County for the most part. There's a couple others in there. This chart shows the blue portion is that lowest impact fee. When they have a low and a high one, variability, the blue represents the lowest. If it has yellow on there, it means they may have some fees that are higher than others. That represents the total or maximum fee that they impose. So for the most part, most of them do have some variability between the fees. So if you kind of go from left to right, we have Pinellas, Orange, Charlotte. Impact fees are pretty low in those counties in terms of what they've adopted. Then you see Manatee County existing, and that's with the little box around it there. That shows what the current fees are. The little yellow in ours is fire districts. We have a couple of fire districts that impose an impact fee and the others don't. So that's the only variability we have right now. We just have for the county fees, it's all the same fee. Then you can see the new Sarasota fees, Lee County, Orange. And then the next one you get, that's the Manatee fee study. And let me go back a little bit here. These numbers here are all impact fees. We've tried to include everything there is. So this includes the county impact fees of parks, transportation, law enforcement, public safety. It also includes the FIF fees. They are in there.
Okay.
And it also includes school board fees where appropriate, and then those little fire district fees.
What school board fees?
All right, so on the Manatee existing, the one with the box around it, there's 0 in there right now because currently there is not one there.
Can I
If
ask,
you, yeah,
Go ahead, answer the question.
All right.
We'll try to keep it question and answer and then let you go.
okay.
Okay, go.
If you look at then the next one with the box around it, which is Manatee fee study amount, it says it's labeled at the bottom. Those reflect the maximum allowable amounts per the studies that were done. That includes our impact fees that the studies, what our study would allow. It also includes the maximum amount that the school boards would allow. We wanted to be able to show the total impact of what that would be.
Okay.
So-
We got a lot of questions on this, so let me just ask two. So, does it matter which, is this the maximum area? Remember, we have different areas.
Correct. If,
Is this the maximum amount in it? I'm not saying it right. The maximum area.
all right, if you look at that box, let's look at the box that's the manatee fee study amount. That one there, the blue represents our lowest fee possible, which is the southeast. That,
Okay.
southwest. Thank you. Southwest. And then the total fee with the additional 3496, that's the highest one. That's the northeast.
Okay.
The northwest is a little bit below northeast, if
Okay.
you want to imagine that there, and the southeast is somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
But this represents the lowest and the highest to make it comparable with the others.
Okay, I thought that was a question. Carol, you had a question on this?
Yeah, because we keep seeing all this stuff and whatever, and it's inaccurate. And I've checked with our attorney. I spoke to the attorney this week. We get all this letters to the editor that are inaccurate. So we have been collecting impact fees. The reason why there's no impact fees in the existing, and I wish people would please remember this, is because by law, we cannot make the school board collect impact fees, correct? Do we have any, and that's my attorney, do I have any legal precedent to tell the school board that they have to charge impact fees? Because we all, it's all the counties letting the school board get away, and I'm just so sick of hearing that.
Madam Chairman, this is working.
Kinda. Move it closer.
Is that better?
A little
Yeah.
closer.
Why don't I just go to the podium?
Yeah.
How about this one?
You can get closer. I don't know why.
Madam Chairman, Commissioner Whitmore, no, you do not. We have to have a study transmitted to us by the school board in order to be able to levy school impact fees. They are levied by the county, but
Right.
not the school board.
I know.
But the school board has to be on record, and the study we have right now is 11 years old and very outdated, so it's not reliable.
And if the school board says we do not want to charge impact fees, do we have to get a study and make them?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
Well, where I'm reading that we didn't do a study, so the school board didn't have to collect impact fees or something like that. I've seen so much stuff that's
I don't know. I
inaccurate.
can't respond to social media.
I
mean,
know.
we need to do this on the record and on the law.
Well, that's why I want my
And-
lawyer to tell me the
and
facts.
So, and I think I've answered the question. You don't have the legal authority to do it unless and until you get a new study that meets the legal standard transmitted to you from the school board. Maybe they'll do that tonight. We'll see.
And the school board has to authorize that.
Yes.
That's what I'm trying to get you to
Yeah, I
say.
think what Carol asked, a specific question, I just want to make sure we got his answer. If the school board were to say, we don't think we need impact fees, if they were to say that, do we have the authority to say, oh, you have to charge impact fees?
Probably not. We'd probably lose that lawsuit because you really need their testimony in court to substantiate that the fees are needed to meet their infrastructure needs, or you're going to have a very hard time meeting the dual rational nexus test and sustaining your fee. And that's really what, when they went to zero in '09, the way they worded it, they said, we don't need the money. And that really, once we saw that, we were stuck with having to go to zero at that point, because I don't know how you defend in court a fee for a service or an infrastructure that the entity that provides it says is unnecessary.
But you said probably not. I don't like that answer.
Well, I
It's either
can't
yes
give you
or
more
no.
than, but we haven't litigated it, so that's the best answer a lawyer can give you is probably not. It's not been litigated as far as I know, but, I think it's a pretty sound, reasoned legal opinion that you'd be in a very indefensible position if you went to court in that situation. I do have to say, there's a lot that they need to cover today
know.
about this
We need
fee
to be
study and
clear,
what's
though.
going forward, what we're doing. And there's some legal standards we have to follow from this point on. So I would hope the board would focus on where we're going now, because there are some decisions you have to make. Most of them are policy, but we need to kind of operate within those parameters.
Okay, we'll try. We're going to ask questions.
Thank
Commissioner Bessel has a question.
Dan, you outlined for us the types of impact fees that are included in the chart for Manatee County, the fee study amount. Do all the other counties shown have the same mix of impact fees?
Yes, we tried to include every impact fee that a county imposed. Some of them may have ones that are different than ours, but if it's an impact fee, we included it on their side and our side, whatever was an
It
impact
may
fee.
not have one that we have, right?
Correct. There are some that may have one for general governmental facilities. There's some of those out there. So whatever was there, we tried to get water and sewer and everything that they imposed as an impact fee.
Okay, thank you.
And Commissioner DeSabatino?
Real quick, so that was part of my question too. Thank you for asking that. Did our fees include the library tax that was recommended in the study?
Yes, ma'am, it does. It
Not tax
includes
fee.
the entire fee study that Tischler Bice presented on October 13th, which did include the library amount.
Over here, kind of chomping at the, go ahead.
It's not a tax, and we don't want to
I'm
use
sorry,
that
tax
T word.
fee.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's-
don't go
Impact-
there.
There's
Impact
a
fee,
Florida
sorry.
Supreme Court case on that. It is critical we maintain that distinction.
Okay, and the school board study was conducted in conjunction with ours, because we had an agreement, and in the agreement, I believe it said that we are to receive a copy of that. Did we get a copy of that as well?
It is up on their website, so anyone can access that site. I don't know if they officially transmitted one to us, but we have copies of that.
Okay, and I know
study.
you have a lot of material, but just for the audience, can you just briefly go over the zones? We went over it at the workshop before, but the public might not know about the 4 zones you're talking about.
Does someone have,
Is it in the presentation?
can someone stick this under the
No.
document, Cameron?
Yeah. Well, we'll get to that. Let's stick to the presentation, and we'll
'Cause
make
that's
sure
that's
that's part of it.
important.
Yeah, yeah, we'll make sure they get to that, but I
We'll
don't want,
come-
I didn't
we'll
want to
come back
totally
to
interrupt
that.
their presentation. I
Okay.
just, if you had questions about this slide, and we'll try to keep it per slide going along. Commissioner Smith?
Yes, Madam Chair. I must follow up on Commissioner Whitmore, for the record. I know we shouldn't respond to blog, but blog, they're sending these to our constituents, and I'm getting questions, so I need to set the record straight before we move forward. I don't think that's one way we can move forward. And I got to get back to the school board. I think Commissioner Whitmore was heading what needs to be said. We can't force the school board to do anything with impact fees. However, if schools are overcapacitated, we don't approve any more development. Is that correct? I need to find out.
No, that's not correct, Commissioner Smith. You
let's go through
cannot
that.
do that. You cannot do that.
Can you go through that? Because I've been told that.
We provided you with a presentation on school concurrency. I think it was maybe shortly after the board recess, where we went over the concurrency law, which basically says that if there is insufficient capacity, then you can require them to engage in what's called proportionate fair share mitigation, but you cannot refuse to approve development. The Florida legislature wrote that into 163, 3180 Florida statutes in 2009, and it's binding.
Okay, well, every development meeting I've been here, it came up with the issue about overcapacity of schools. So if I'm confused on that issue, we get a report from the school board basically stating that the schools are not overcapacitated.
Not overcapacity.
Yeah,
Okay.
not overcapacitated. We get residents stand up and says that it's overcapacitated. My question is, if it is, do we still approve development? I mean, I need to know that.
As I said, you don't have a legal basis to refuse to approve the development if the school's over capacity. I don't know why, but the Florida legislature also wrote into 163, 3180 that you have to get that report. It's not just part of our interlocal agreement, it's a statutorily required report, but then basically they wrote into the same statute that you can't use that as a basis to turn down development. All you can do is when they come in for concurrency approval, require them to mitigate their impacts. Now, that could be a considerable cost. It's a very good chance it could be more than the cost of the recommended school impact fees.
But what he's saying, and this has been pretty standard for concurrency, that when you have a deficiency, like let's say in a school, that before a final site plan gets approved, then they have to come up with a mitigation strategy. They have to show how are they going to mitigate that. Are they going to pay for more school classrooms? How are they going to mitigate that? And that's when he says a proportionate share, they have to pay their part. It's kind of a pay-and-go thing. Once they pay it, then they can go forward. Am I correct in that?
Yes.
And they is the developer.
Yes. Commissioner Whitmore?
Well, along that lines, I remember reading on a fact email or something recently that there's a county in Florida where the schools were full and they had to stop until they built a school. And maybe it was in the National Association of Counties. I don't know. Does anybody know of that? Have heard of it recently? Because
I did read that too.
you
That's
did.
why-
Something got sent to us, and I think it's a school, an area in Florida where they could not do anymore because they were over capacity, and the schools didn't have enough money to build the school, kind of like our situation here in Manatee County. And so the builders had to put that money in to build the school. Now,
But
would
there's a
that
difference
happen?
between having to put that money in and being told you can't develop.
No, I'm not, I'm talking about, well,
Okay,
if he
you have
can't
to
develop,
do-
he's gonna have to pay for the school, the builders
Right,
would.
and that's what the statute
Help me
allows you
with
to
that.
do, is make them pay their share of the needed school. But it doesn't allow you to basically impose a development moratorium.
Because right now, from what I read and hear, Manatee County school system does not have money in their reserves to build a school at all yet, and they've told us that during public meetings. So if we reach that threshold that they need an elementary school and every elementary seat is full in the county, we could still approve the development, but the developer would have to pay to build the new school, the development community, correct?
Yes.
Okay, we
That's
need to hear, that's,
Yeah, that's what we need to do.
remember, we're not lawyers and all that. We need to hear that, what you just said, because it happened somewhere here in Florida.
Yeah, it's going on now, man.
And I read it.
Okay, Commissioner Ball?
Yeah, I've got several questions that I'll just ask as we go along, but one thing on this discussion that I just want to point out about schools, with whether or not the developer has to pay for this. The bottom line is, the people that buy the homes
Right.
are going to end up paying. So,
100% right.
we need to remember that. This is not about a developer. This is about people buying homes because they pay those impact fees. And the other thing is, how does that affect, if we get to that point, we need to also be talking about economic development,
You're right.
job growth. So we need to look at, when we're talking about impact fees, who is going to really be affected the most? And it's the people buying homes, bottom line.
Commissioner DeSabatino?
Do you have I know this is getting a little off topic, but could be for later on, what the fee is per household? So the developer would know to factor in,
No.
if they don't pay impact fees on one hand, which the homeowner pays, versus if they have to pay into the fund, then that would come out of their money. So that's something for them to think about.
Bill can correct me, but I think that's specific to that development. The calculation's done each time
Talking about
based on
prop
the,
share, Robin?
on the
prop share that you
proportionate
talked
share, yeah. Would have to be a calculation done on a development that failed to have enough seats. They would have to do that. Is that right, Bill?
Yeah, it's done on a property-specific basis. As yet, it's not happened in Manatee County, although it looks like there may be some on the way, because we're starting to get information from the school board indicating that they are reaching the bottom of capacity in some categories of schools in some areas.
Okay, and just to close on this slide,
That's done. There's a three-party agreement between the school board, the county, and the developer to basically exact the proportionate fair share mitigation, and we've never presented one to you because as yet, that situation has not arose in our development process.
okay. And just to close on this slide, the blue area for Manatee County, the 18,671, is the impact fee that we've been charging for a three-bedroom home since 2011. Is that correct?
No,
No.
no, will be.
That's the proposed.
That's what it would be
Right.
if imposed at the full amount in the Tischler Bice study and the school board at the full amount.
Okay,
in
I'm
the
sorry, I
Tischler
did get
Bice.
confused. Are you going to show us a slide that shows what we are currently collecting?
That's right there.
Yeah, let me just reiterate it here real quick. If you look at the boxed, the little rectangle, purple rectangle around it, that first one,
The existing.
that is the existing
Okay.
impact fee.
Okay.
And for all practical purposes, it's about $11,800 in that range. And
For everything, though.
if, everything else would stay the same if you go over to the next box on the purple, except the county fee would be at what the Tischler Bice study has presented.
Okay.
And the school fee, if it was at the full amount of what the Tischler Bice study presented. that's what they would be. So
Okay.
if you look at the blue part first, currently 11,557 is our current impact fees and FIFs. Doesn't have anything for school board in it at the current time. The 18,671, the blue in the next box, that's what it would be in the southwest, our lowest area. It would go up to 18,671, and it would have the school piece as well in there at
Yeah,
that
I
point.
misspoke. The 11,557 is what we've been charging since 2011 consistently.
So we've been charging
Since
impact fees.
2011, yes,
11,
ma'am.
consistently. In 2011, that was when the fees were set,
That's
according to the 2011 study. It's not an arbitrary reduction. It was a study that was done in 2011 that showed what the impact fees should be, just like we're doing today. A study that shows what the 100% impact fees would be.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. I just want to clarify that. Sorry for screwing
Just
that
as a final comment on this, I think it's important that we all try to understand what these say. That shows that that fee goes from about 11,000 and something to 22, which almost doubles the amount, and it's pretty healthy increase.
Significant.
If we go to the next slide.
May I ask one last question? Can you go back? It's confusing. The original existing, that doesn't include school board, correct? Because they don't have an.
Right, it's currently at 0 because they're not
Okay.
imposing one right now.
So it would be nice if we had another step in there that just showed the county alone what would it be going up to, minimum, maximum, and then have another one with everyone.
Yeah, we tried to make this where it could be as comparable and show, we can provide any kind of different
Right.
things that you would
Because it
like.
looks like the county itself is increasing 7,000,
Right.
and that's
Yeah.
not
This was so we could show the full picture of
Okay.
what's being contemplated.
Okay.
But we could, John, can you write that down? We can provide you a slide that basically backs out the school. That's what,
Okay,
Yeah, if you basically took 6,000 off of the 22,167, that would be the number.
right, so it's only
6,400,
1,100
I think,
difference.
is the school fee.
So ours is only 1,100 difference.
And Madam Chairman, when this comes back to you, when our ordinance comes to you in December, that's the schedule now, it's Thursday Planning Commission and then December Land Use, but it will just be the county's ordinance, just the county's fees. The school boards are
Unless they
traveling
vote
behind
tonight.
those. So we will provide you the information at that hearing that deals exclusively with those fees, with just the county's fees, because we have to in that hearing.
Unless they vote tonight to enact.
It's too late to get it into the schedule for our planning commission.
Got
And,
it.
we have decided it needs to go to planning commission. We didn't do that years ago, but now school concurrency and school impact fees are written into 163, 3180 and our comprehensive plan. So we feel it's a legal risk to not take it to planning commission first.
Thank you.
Dan, if I may, the chart here that you're showing us is for, hold on, Southwest, right?
The blue
Yeah.
portions in the new would be southwest, northeast is the highest one, so that would be that top number.
Yeah, the difference is, I
Gotcha.
just did
Okay.
the math, the difference is $4,321
Gotcha.
is the increase by Manatee County. If my math is correct.
4,000.
4,000.
4,321, not including the school board 6,000, so
Right.
that's,
Hefty.
okay,
All right?
thank you, keep going.
All right. So now what we've done is we've chosen a few of the non-residential categories to just kind of go through them. And the first thing that you need to probably know about these is, since they're non-residential, they don't have any school in them at all. That school impact fees are not charged on non-residential properties. So this is strictly the county fees, Commissioner DeSabatino. It does not include water and sewer FIFs because it's impossible to know what meter size and that kind of thing. That's how we determine FIF amounts. So does it have that in there? Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. It has an estimate. It says
We assume the same across the board. We assumed a meter size.
same meter size across all sites. I'm sorry.
That's good,
It is
'cause
in
that's
there.
significant.
Thank you. Yes. All right, so the FIFs are included in there, I'm sorry. Okay. And again, if you start on the left-hand side, you see the lower numbers on some of these other counties, Pinellas, Hillsborough, and Charlotte. And then you have Sarasota. The existing Manatee number is This is for retail, 100,000 square feet. The Manatee existing is about $860,000. Then the full fee study amount is about 1468025. So again, you can see there's some pretty substantial increases in the fees there, and it moves us up kind of in comparison to our neighbors.
Can I ask a question about
Yes, ma'am.
Pasco?
Yes.
Pasco has they have incentive to build in the more urbanized area. So are these the incentive fees or the highest fees?
Again, it follows that same thing, the lowest fee and the highest fee.
Okay,
And so in their lowest areas, they have, in essence, bought down those fees with other revenues so that they can make those fees lower in certain places. And they've committed substantial resources and revenues for that purpose. Is that correct?
John Osborne, Madam Chair, that's essentially correct. The Pasco has the most variation. We've always enjoyed a one-page impact fee schedule. They have a 32-page Excel spreadsheet about size 2 font, and the geographies, it depends upon what fire district you're in, what utility service area. There's all these different variations and variables to figure out your fee. They certainly have incentives to direct you to a cheaper fee for certain areas, but there's as you can see in the table, there's a tremendous amount of variation, and they also make it extremely expensive to build where they're not really looking for a development.
that's what I thought. Okay. Questions on this? Commissioner Smith, do you have a question on
Yeah,
this? slide?
passed on the Pasco's incentivizing the slum and blighted area to get that uplifted. And so you can redevelop the area that needs to be redevelopment. The impact fees they have theirs is, and they're dealing with other issues and stuff, is encouraging people, as he mentioned, in areas that need to be uplifted, that the impact is a little different from there with other incentives that they can give to you from that standpoint. I know that I talked to one of the commissioners at FAC before it came out. I think it was an article about a week or so ago that they're dealing with the urban part to revitalize that by additional incentives where it make it more feasible for you to do it downtown and go out farther.
Yeah, I know that they have areas that they're trying to focus, similar like we're doing with our southwest area, right, John, that they're trying to focus on where they have infrastructure existing. Could you just comment on that, perhaps?
Yes, ma'am. You hit the nail on the head. That is exactly right. They're trying to focus redevelopment, infill development in those areas where they have existing water lines and sewer lines and a grid roadway system and things like that, and where they're also making infrastructure investments. That's sort of their prioritization.
Okay. And Commissioner Baugh?
Actually, I was kind of going to bring up economic development. I mean, it seems to me, and I realize that retail probably wouldn't qualify, but light industrial, office space, I know you've got that coming up, but I'm just going to pull it out now with retail. How do we have any incentives that we can offer with this impact fee, the way it's set up? How are we going to have any economic development impact, with incentives for companies looking to move here or companies that are already here? It seems to me that it's pretty one size fits all. And the reason I say that, and I know you've all heard this, but I'm going to bring it up. I know out in Lakewood Ranch, way before I was on the board, there was a bowling alley that was supposed to go in, and it didn't. And the reason it didn't was because the impact fees were so high. And it looks like to me we're basically doing the same thing. I mean, I don't know that being the third highest in our area, how are we going to be competitive? I guess that's the question.
Yep.
How are we going to be competitive in our area with the surrounding counties that we compete with every day?
That is a challenge we're looking at, but in the economics of it all, typically, the impact fee is not that important when it comes to retail. Retail will follow rooftops. If you have enough people, retail's going to show up and they're going to pay the fee.
I can tell you I'd be concerned about it, and I'm in retail.
But we're looking at it. It's more important when you start getting down to office and other forms of commercial endeavors other than retail that you need to absolutely look out for job creation, impacts on the marketplace, driving, that economic development, job creation, business relocation to our borders. And that's part of the equation we'll get to this morning.
And I realize, like I said, that retail is sometimes the exception to the rule. I'm not sure that that's fair, but I realize in light industrial office space
Yeah.
is much more existing. But, that is just a concern when I look at this that I'm seeing is being the third highest in the surrounding areas concerns me because of economic development. That's all I'm saying at this
Well,
point.
and something that also we need to keep in mind is our tax base, which we know is not coming from existing residential development, because existing residential development is capped under Save Our Homes. 0.8 could be 0 next year. If there's no inflation, it's either 3% or the lower of the CPI, so it was 0.8%. So existing homes are not carrying the tax base. It's new commercial development, it's new residential development, new industrial development,
Growth.
and sales, as
That's
Robin will
growth.
point out. And so it is part of the picture when we're looking at revenues available. And that's, and everyone says, well, maybe there's no relation between impact fees and development. They can just suck up a doubling of the impact fees. There's not going to be any effect on whether or not something's built. Well, maybe not. Maybe the market cannot just handle. So then what happens to the tax base? And it is something that when we're looking at revenues, we have to think about, because it's what's been carrying the increase in tax base that has allowed us to not raise taxes, not raise the ad valorem, because of the increase, because of growth. That increase goes away, it's a different picture. It's something we just have to keep in mind, but it is part of the equation.
Yeah.
Good point, Madam Chair.
Yes, it is.
Commissioner, and
We'll get to that this
we're going to
morning.
have some comments along those lines here in just a little bit.
Commissioner DeSabatino and Commissioner Smith, sorry.
Can I make one comment about that before we leave? Our economic development incentives do have one of the incentives is paying a portion of the transportation impact fee if they meet our EDI or QTI requirements. So it doesn't help the retail side, but on some of those others, the industrial, the manufacturing, and those others, that is available if they qualify. So anywhere from 50 to 100%, depending on the jobs and the wages.
May I, Madam Chair?
Well, I got other people on the board. I'll come back to you.
Okay.
Okay.
DeSabatino.
Right, and there are categories that I guess we'll talk about this afternoon on the qualified targeted industries that get credits or abatement sort of thing. And we also have the tax abatement. I don't think anybody's used it as yet. Is that, offered up when people go to apply to let them know it could offset their expenses. Also, we talked about before that could be a possibility of possibly paying the fees at the end of the project at CO versus permitting, or setting up a fee schedule for the little guy.
Commissioner, currently, the impact fees are imposed at building permit and collected at CO. For the FIFs, they are collected at building permit. Is that correct, Cheryl?
Okay, so they're not paid at permit.
They're not paid at permit stage. You've basically become a lending institution if you allow them to do it past that CO. We basically don't have any hammer after that point to enforce payment without
get it.
some really significant
And,
issues, I think.
Okay, and these other counties, do you know when their studies were done, if they're recent or if they're older, or, so we're comparing apples to apples?
I think the people that worked on it know some of those things, and if you'd like more information about some of that, we can do it. Some of them are more recent, some are not. Some of them make decisions to do other things. It's maybe not the full fee study amount that they're imposing, that kind of thing. So those things are all over the map. We tried to give you what exists today based on what they have.
He has
so.
the,
Great.
he has the awesomest.
Better one, John.
Yeah.
But just for the statement about growth, paying its way, the impact fees can't pay for existing. So the growth doesn't pay for existing when they utilize the existing. So I just want that on the record.
Good point. Commissioner Smith?
Yes, Madam Chair. Just to echo what Commissioner Ball just mentioned, and, she's correct when you're talking about economic development and also affordable homes. We're in a situation now where we're dealing with the impact fee study, and those things are issues to me. And she's correct. To me, seem like one size fit all. The fact if someone wants to establish something with 50 employees, what do we have for that person? Forget the ones got 400 or 500. Do we have anything that incentivizes them to develop here or to move here? Those are 50 jobs or 25 jobs of the person who helped build Manatee County, been here for 30 or 40, 50 years and say, I want to build a new building. And, do we have anything for economic development for those individuals? And so I'm going to listen to the impact study, but boy, this is very tough. You talk about these other counties got multiple incentives besides the impact fees to encourage people, to build and develop in certain areas, to remove slum and blight. And she's correct. We deal with one size fit all. Now, maybe we can move with the meetings the county administrator got January next year and deal with those issues with the finance committee, but something is going to have to be done to offset no matter what we do if we're going to encourage economic development. These other counties, I'm familiar with most of them, they got tons of incentives to encourage certain developments in areas where they got trouble. And, so that's my thought, and I just wanted to tell Commissioner Bosch she's right on target with what she's saying.
Commissioner,
And
we are going to talk a little bit about the affordable housing side of things for just a little bit here in a minute. And on the economic development, our EDI program does go as low as 5 new jobs, so it does have some flexibility there. We made that bar really low during the downturn to encourage whatever we could, but the board can continue to evaluate that economic development incentive program and see if there's things that we want to do different or change over time.
And my last comment, Madam Chair, if we, impact fee, whatever we decide to do, county needs a pivot person that's their job to get these people and tell them what we've got to develop. And we just can't sit there and wait, say, this is what we got. You got to have somebody, this is what we're going to do. We're going to get business to come here. We're going to have incentives. You got to have somebody doing that. We just can't sit and wait anymore.
We're going to talk about that's the topic this afternoon's conversation. I understand your point relevant to impact fees. That is certainly
We do.
makes sense.
We'll talk about this afternoon, but we partner with the Economic Development Corporation. They are the arm in this community that does that outreach. You fund them to do that. Sherry and her office, Karen Stewart, are the point person for the EDC to contact to get any information they need from the county government so that they and the EDC don't have to chase around 1,700 employees to figure out who's got the right answer. Sherry and her staff will take that role on. But your funding to the EDC helps them do that outreach.
Commissioner Whitmore.
And I know we're only on, I think, slide 3, so I'll make it quick. Retail and the study. Sorry, but you knew this was going to be a long meeting. The study, and I'm going back to the University Health Park, and we used to own it. We didn't own it for a long time now, but there was going to be a surgery center built there, and I remember that. And the impact fees were almost $900,000 to a surgery center that's open from 7 a.m. and all the patients are out by 5 because it's a day surgery center. You don't spend the night. And it was almost, $800,000. So they finally met with somebody back with the county and realized that's not, because they were under the same umbrella as retail or the others.
Office.
But it wasn't. It was a professional office. And so they finally got switched into a professional office category. But until somebody complained, it wasn't caught. So how do I know that your study is fairly accurate and fair to businesses? Because without us bringing that to your attention, you didn't realize it's just like a doctor's office. They left by 4 or 5 o'clock. They opened at 7.
Let me explain that.
It wasn't an intense unit. No weekends, no nights.
Have the option.
We have classifications, And what we do is we have a team approach to this. What happened there is we had a classification that was inappropriate, and we put it in for the office complex. And we put it in the general office, lowered the impact fee dramatically.
Dramatically.
As it relates to the discussion about a bowling alley, that was a misclassification also. It wasn't that the impact fee was wrong, it was a classification that was wrong, and that should have been corrected. But you will have those anomalies because not every business will fit neatly into each of the categories. So it takes some thinking and assuming and talking and
And you have the option to do right, still?
Absolutely, you
Have the
have
option
to
a
do your own
separate
study.
to show what, in fact, maybe you could address that?
But a Joe Blow wouldn't know that.
Madam Chairman, that's correct. Our code has had the option to do what's called an alternative impact analysis. I think virtually every code I've ever worked with has that sort of fail-safe valve because it really isn't possible to have a categorical matrix of fees that covers every possible use. It would be thousands of pages long and you'd still miss something. But it does put the burden on the fee payer,
Right.
to raise the issue. It does allow the county to initiate it at county expense in some circumstances, though it doesn't necessarily have to be the fee payer that initiates it. But if they come in and they feel that the category they've been put in is inappropriate, they do need to speak up and assert that right.
Okay. Commissioner Baugh?
Yeah, I have an issue with that, putting the burden on the fee payer. If we've got a business that's looking to
Service.
come to Manatee County, or residents that are here that want to open a business, I don't want to hinder them, I want to help them. And every taxpayer in Manatee County should feel that way because 9 times out of 10, it helps us to keep our millage rate down. So I don't want to put the burden on the fee payer per se, particularly, in us people just coming, trying to open a business. But that's another story. Dan, getting back to what you were saying, and we were talking about economic development, the reason I brought it up is because I don't see anywhere in the report where we've kind of addressed that. And so I've learned in the last almost 4 years that we make sure that we see it in writing to make sure that it's in there and it's going to be done a certain way. Is there some way that, those incentives can be also listed with the impact fee schedule so that we realize what's going on with that?
I think I understand your question. When I think they come through either the Economic Development Corporation, the EDC, or through our economic development folks, Karen Stewart, we help funnel them and help them figure things out. We do that. That's what we do if they come through that process. So we do that. I don't know every single thing that comes through. I don't think we can do an independent determination of how that works. We try to make sure our economic development incentives are out on the website, available. People who coming in as new businesses or wanting to redevelop, we try to make sure that they know to come in and talk to us. But
I guess what's bothering me is when I look at the charts that you're showing us this morning, and we're the third highest in our area, I would be interested to know what the other counties, surrounding counties are doing, particularly Pasco, Collier, and Lee, as far as their incentives and how their impact fees are set up. I would rather have more information on those counties so that I know if we're going to be the third highest, that we're kind of being done like others. Competitiveness comes back into the
I
picture
want
for
you to
me.
clarify. We have no payment of commercial impact fees as an economic incentive. There is, the only place that I know the county pays impact fees is for affordable housing, single family.
True.
Other than that, there's no economic incentive that pays impact fees, or is there?
there is.
Oh.
Under our
Okay.
under
I had it
our
wrong. Cut me
EDI
off.
program, the county's EDI program, if it's a qualifying business as an EDI
Oh, yeah,
business,
okay. I
they
have
can,
that.
if,
Transportation
I
impact.
don't remember the exact numbers, if it's
I just
over
read that.
115% of the average wage, they get 50 25% off of their transportation impact fee. That's the big one.
The last
If
thing
they,
we should be
if their
reducing.
wages are more than 150%, they get 75% off, and I believe it's 200%, they get no transportation impact fee.
We have Sherry here,
Sherry's
and Sherry is a fountain of information and can answer.
Did I get that close, Sherry?
You're right.
All right.
And this afternoon, at the work session, we have all of that laid out in your economic development book. Karen will be going through each page. It'll show a comparison of all of our incentives compared to other cities, other the program, and each of the incentives in detail. So you're hitting on everything that we'll be covering in complete detail.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sherry.
Correcting that. Okay, let's keep going.
Okay, and just to clarify a little bit there, we kind of, I recognize, Commissioner Ball, your concerns about how it impacts development and redevelopment.
Economic development, yeah, it's so
Economic
important.
development. But we have to kind of keep the two separated. The fee is established based on the study that's presented and how you choose to impose that. And then our economic development incentives, you can do those how you want to try to help deal with that situation, but you have to kind of keep the two subjects separated
Very
in terms
difficult.
of doing that.
It's very difficult.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, Madam Chair, I mean, I know, and I know Attorney Clegg has stated it, the fact that we didn't have to do affordable housing study. However, it would have been very beneficial if it was done when we deal with impact fees, because you're asking for me to support an impact fee increase and wishing and hoping that the county does the right thing.
Madam Chairman, if I could just add to what Mr. Slant said, an impact fee study is it's a technical and clinical process of looking at infrastructure costs, growth rates, allocating them through some rather complex analysis that we hire consultants to do. It's become high art in and of itself. But it is not the place where you decide what's the county's policy going to be on affordable housing or economic development, because the fee has to meet the dual rational nexus test. So the people who work in this, they look at it as a pretty technical analysis, but once you know what the fees need to be for the various categories of uses, if you decide you want to do something for affordable housing to relieve that fee, you can put money towards that. If you decide you want to do something for economic development, you can put money towards that. But when you make your decision about what your fee ought to be, you're looking at the study and you're making across-the-board decisions based upon all of the uses and where the numbers fall, not selectively. So you can't say, well, we'd like the fee to be less for affordable housing, so we'll just lower that number. Because if you do, you skew the proportion that everybody else is paying for the same infrastructure. So that's why we try to keep them separate, because the courts expect us to when we're going through our analysis of what fee we're going to impose.
And we don't waive the fees, we pay
We
the fees.
do not waive them, and I'm
For the
glad you
fund
said
that's set
that.
up either for economic
paying
development or
them,
right.
affordable
We-
housing. And the economic development one typically does not include retail, right?
I don't know the answer to that, but economic development and affordable housing are legitimate public purposes for which the county can use county dollars to help subsidize or incentivize those types of development. And so we pay some of the impact fee on its behalf.
Okay.
And that's consistent with what other jurisdictions
And
are
that's
doing
a
as well.
Florida statute to do that, correct?
Well, it's not
The county has
specified
to
in the
pay?
statute. It's been a common law, case law-driven practice, and it's pretty common around the state. And the conferences I've been at where you hear what other counties are doing, most of them are tackling the issue that way.
Okay. Commissioner DeStevatine.
Agree with that.
And we do have, 1.2, Ed, set aside in that 1.4?
Good.
Okay, so,
Know that, good.
For affordable housing.
For affordable
We're going
housing.
to talk about that briefly in a minute.
okay. And can you explain briefly when a business wants to expand an existing facility, what they're charged for the impact on that?
Charlie, you want to do it?
Wait a minute. Sorry. Forgot about the microphone. They're charged based on any building area that they're adding to the existing facility.
At the same rate as if they were building a freestanding?
Yes.
Square feet.
Well, unless there's a change of use, that's correct. I mean, if the building, if an existing enterprise is just looking to expand and they build an addition, then they would be assessed at the rate based on what their existing business was. If someone is coming into a vacant building and adding something to it, the additional space may be subject to fees depending on
Change of
whether
use.
depending on whether the change in use represents something that would have a higher impact.
Okay, I just wanted that on the record.
That's good.
Okay, moving right along. Lots of questions, which you
Okay,
knew.
slide 4.
Slide.
It's good information, though.
Yeah, it's good.
It is.
It helps so everybody here can understand it too, besides us. It's good reinforcement. Right.
Hey,
Yeah.
okay.
Oh, we're general office.
All right.
Hey, we're fourth. Hey,
I think everyone understands how these work now. The boxed one on the left is the existing Manatee one. You can see it in comparison to the other counties, and then the boxed one to the right in the purple box is the proposed full fee study amount. And then with light industrial, oh, I gotta point this thing. There it goes.
You have gone up a lot.
yeah.
And light industrial, it's kind of pretty much the same story there in terms of our relationship to the other counties and the amount of the
Again,
increase.
more than double. More than double. Light industrial, which provides the highest, I believe, tax base
Yep.
in the county, right?
Does.
Something to
For,
think about.
for impact fees.
And also.
More than double the impact fees, from looking at, are more than double. But today, I don't know which one of you are experts in tax base, but I assume light industrial provides the highest tax base. I'm going from my memory when I was trained in Leadership Manatee, and they showed where your tax base comes from. And light industrial was the highest tax base.
You would be right, Madam Chair.
And that was back in 1994, so I assume it hasn't changed a whole lot.
And again, that one probably has the best chance of meeting our EDI or QTI numbers if they actually,
And general office, there's tons of general offices, and we increased it so much.
that's the end of the comparisons that we've put together. I think it gives you a pretty
Okay.
good feel for what's going on the residential side and the non-residential side.
Affordable housing.
Y'all, in your questions and comments and discussions, have brought up a lot of the things that we're about to talk about next. I'm going to turn it over here to Mr. Hunsaker in a minute. But in general, they are going up a substantial amount. And in relation, you can see that in relation to our county peers, we're moving well off towards the right side or the higher side there. So with this, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Hunsaker for a minute.
Commissioners, you've seen in the last workshop and this workshop, the cost and the results of the study and the impact to the payer. What we need to consider is that there's a big demand for infrastructure. We need a lot of infrastructure, and this cost will help cover those demands. But at the same time, we need to be sensitive to, as you mentioned here earlier, what's the implication on the marketplace? Are we going to have a substantial impact and drive economic development and job creation outside the borders of the county? Is it too big an increase all at one time that the market can't absorb it and there would be disruption in the marketplace? Those are all things that we're looking at and trying to determine what's appropriate. We're not in isolation. We have to look at surrounding counties. We have to look at surrounding communities, as you see in these charts. And we have to take all those into consideration before we make a recommendation to you. Dan's going to talk to you about affordable housing in a moment, but we're prepared to make recommendations about these fees, knowing that we want to remain competitive. We want to stimulate job growth. We don't want to have a disincentive for job growth and economic development. And it's a fine line, more of an art than a science. The study in and of itself is a science. It's taking data and putting it in a format that covers the cost of what we anticipate we need to build or acquire. But that's the science part. The art part is, how do we remain competitive? How do we continue to have job growth? And are we sustainable over the long haul? Is it a fee that we can live with for a period of time before we do the next study? And as Mr. Clegg has indicated to you, we need to do this on a regular basis. Regular being not well-defined, but we can't let it go too far without looking at current market conditions. If the market remained the same as it is today, interest rates remain the same, the number of units being built remains the same, we probably could go longer without a study. But when we have major changes in the marketplace that are going to drive the need for infrastructure, we need to revisit these studies. It's a challenging bit of work that we've been involved in and that you're involved in. We have to make decisions in the coming months in order to implement these fees, to be able to generate the cash in order to build what we need to build. With that, Dan, do you want to move on?
Yes, sir.
Can I just make one question clarification? So the fees we've been looking at, they're the Manatee County maximum that could be charged.
Based on the study, we would not want to try in any way to go beyond that point. So it's the maximum allowable
Maximum.
amount that we would.
And the other counties are what they are charging. So it is what they are charging. We don't know. Perhaps they had a higher maximum they could have charged, and maybe they changed it. We don't know that, right?
Yes. We also don't know, with a lot of detail, what other revenues they put into the mix. I was following Lee County for a while and how they arrive at what they do, and they put other revenues into the mix in order to stimulate their economy. We don't have the benefit of other revenues other than the board raising property taxes. You can't take any other revenue and put it into this because all of your revenues are currently accounted for in your operating budget and your capital budget, such that if you wanted to take other revenues and put them into the mix in order to make these fees different, you would have to cut something else out of your budget, current budget, and I'm not so sure we want to go through that exercise. We have challenges because of that, but you can see some of these governments will be the ones we're talking to when we have this budget restructuring committee about what other revenues do they put into play when they're dealing with issues such as impact fees.
Madam Chairman, could I just make one additional comment? I do think this is as good a time as any to state that the county attorney's office is on record beginning, I think, that December 31st of 2014, we sent an email to Ed and Dan that there is a need to engage a new impact fee study by the end, well, by the middle of next year.
By engage, you mean approve?
Approve, adopt, but we don't tell you whether it should be at the maximum amount or some other amount. As your lawyers, that's not our job. But the study that we had in 2011 was really taking the 2006 study and plugging updated numbers into it. And there's nothing wrong with that. But at some point, we're getting up on close to 10 years on that methodology, or really 10 years on that methodology in June of next year. And that's really, from a legal standpoint, that starts to give us concern. So if there are questions about why are we going through this process now, and I've heard some people ask that, well, we've advised Mr. Hunsaker and his staff, and to their credit, they followed that advice, that we need to. I just want everybody to understand that there is a legal reason why we have to do this. Now, I agree with Ed. Once you have an updated methodology and market numbers, if in a few years you haven't seen a huge amount of changes, you do something similar to what we did in 2011, just plug updated numbers into it. That's okay, but right now we're looking back into the most volatile period that anybody can remember. There was, our impact fees spiked in '06, and that was a lot more controversial than this, I might add. I was there for it, and it was painful. And then we had a 2007 precipitous drop, and the market changed drastically. The cost of infrastructure went way down, and now it's coming back up. So because of that volatility, there is a need now to restudy all of this and start from a clean slate in terms of what our analysis is that supports our fees.
Sure. Commissioner Ball?
Yeah, good conversation. Bill, you made a lot of fine, good points. And I think that you're right. Now is the time that we do need to look at impact fees, but, I think it's kind of hard to figure out the amount that we charge because we're looking at, employment. The construction industry, I've got some figures here, we're only at about 40% of where we were in '05. We're in the second year of a recovery, so we still have a long way to go. And how do we make sure whatever fee that we raise the impact fees to, how do we make sure that we're being competitive, we're not hurting ourselves, we're still going to see the growth and so forth that we've seen, which is important. You talk about millage rate and the people that already live here. Growth, most people don't realize it, but the growth that we've seen has really supported us in many, many ways financially. If you look at, as Betsy brought up, a homestead, and I'm a homesteader, I think we probably all are that's up here, 3% a year. That's not enough to cover
Or
our needs.
CPI, which
Or
is
CPI,
lower, which is
correct.
why it was 0.8.
But we need to make sure that, that being said, that we're not going to put ourselves out of being competitive with the surrounding counties. And one thing that I guess I'll bring up later as we go along, our neighbor to the south, there's quite a big difference there between them and what our projected fees are. So as we go along, just, that's a concern. I mean, you've really got a fine line that you're trying to show us today because we've got to stay competitive and not hurt people that are already here, people that are employed here, and we also need to make sure that we don't harm ourselves with job creation. So tough angle to take.
It's that balance that we're trying to draw. We need, because of that growth, we need infrastructure. We need roads. We need public safety. We need parks. And that's the counterbalance that we're trying every day to figure out where's the balance between building what's needed out in the community and being competitive in the marketplace. It's an art, as I said, not a science. You ready to go?
Ed, you know what? On what you just said, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about transportation. We have, as you know, I mean, you gave us the list, of the roads that need to be repaired, that cannot be repaired with impact fees.
Absolutely not.
So, impact fees is not our salvation. It's not going to save us. We need to look at other avenues on transportation.
We are, part of that committee structure is to look at how we fund these things and come back and make recommendations to you all about how we do it and bringing other county administrators in to talk about how they do it if they're doing it differently. Because these counties to the left, I know, have other revenues that they put into the mix.
Well, I guess
And we don't. And the ones to the right don't have other revenues in the mix. We've done that research.
Yeah.
And when you don't have other revenues in the mix, you got to charge a higher fee.
And you're absolutely right. And that's why these impact fees that you're showing us today, being where they are, the amount of them, that's why it concerns me so, because it's not going to pay for the $1 billion worth of roads that we have out there that we can't repair with impact fees. So we've really got to look at the whole picture, Ed. You're right. You're right.
Commissioner Whitmore?
Well, and I had written that down just before you spoke. Sarasota is different than us because they do have what all the other cities in Manatee County have, where they have a communications tax, they have franchise tax, they have stormwater utilities, they actually have business tax. I think Sarasota does too. Those are other revenue streams that Manatee County doesn't have.
And also a facility investment fee, I don't think they call it.
They call it,
It's, whatever it is, it covers the cost of utilities, the upfront cost of
yeah,
utilities.
so you're looking, we're looking at limping by on
Property taxes.
property taxes, and I've said that from day one, and also they've got a healthcare tax
Well, they have a penny sales tax for infrastructure,
and
right?
for healthcare.
Yes.
And that's a biggie.
Sarasota.
When you have that kind of revenue
A nonprofit hospital.
to build and take care of existing deficiencies. I mean, you have to remember, impact fees only went into place in 1986. And Florida has been a state where people have come with limited taxes. It's been great for people to come and retire, but the reality is the infrastructure, there was no fund to pay for that prior to 1986. So we got a lot of deficiencies that have built up that couldn't be solved in 86. They can't be solved in 2004. They can't be solved in 2007, and they can't be solved in 2015 with impact fees because those are existing deficiencies.
And if Ed could answer, because I'm trying to keep track of what Sarasota's doing because they spend so much money and and also look at all the development they have. Look at the Main Street. 20 years ago, you could walk down, there was a ghost town. And look at all that revenue they're collecting, but they just did something, infrastructure tax? And did the board approve that? Did that go to
Mobility fees.
mobility fee? Did that go for a referendum or did the board just approve it?
Board did it.
So they just went, and how much was that? Do you know what they raised it?
No, I don't.
They just, I mean.
We,
So we're looking, Manatee County we're bare bones. We've been very prudent with our monies, but us taxpayers, the property owners, we're the ones that are paying for everything. There's, nobody else is sharing in on it as far, what I'm saying is like these other taxes that they have where the sales taxes and stuff. Not talking healthcare, I'm talking about others.
You're saying the burden is primarily on
Totally.
property
Yeah,
tax.
and that's why you see some of their rates lower because they're able to do that. They have other revenue sources.
And last but not least, they have a public hospital with its own independent
Thank you.
taxing authority.
Thank you, a publicly owned hospital.
You know that.
Sarasota has,
Ed, maybe you know that.
you know,
Okay, let's
comparing
not get
Manatee and
off on that.
Sarasota is apples and oranges.
Oh, well, that's
Thank you,
true.
Mickey.
Let's not get on healthcare yet. Commissioner DeSantis.
Yeah, we had one.
No, we never
And construction costs have gone up dramatically over the last couple of years. And so even if we want to, we have contracts out and sometimes the price goes up because the price of the materials has gone up. So we have to do, adjustments to that. But the big picture is, we're borrowing money to forward fund like the 44th. So that's money that could be used if we borrowed it for existing roads. So when we collect the impact fees to pay back the loan, so we need to collect those impact fees, and like the 44th would be collected from the southwest portion and the southeast portion. So once you collect those fees to pay that back, then you could pay back our loans and then maybe take out other loans to pay for current roads, correct? So, so it's all,
You have to have a revenue source to pay back the loan
That's the thing.
right, and that's from the impact fee for the new road.
for new roads
Right,
only.
but for
we
the
can't
old
do
ones, you
old
could
ones.
take out a loan to pay for advanced forwarding,
yes. There's-
repairs,
It's a different revenue
but you
stream
need a
that
funding
we would
stream
use
to
to.
pay that back in the
Right,
long
that
run.
was
So
it.
it's all a catch-up game.
Good.
Okay, keep going forward.
Okay.
Slide 5.
Slide, please.
And I thought we'd be done by 11 today. Silly me.
I gotta go visit my husband. He thinks he's in Never Never Land.
All right. Okay.
Not to dwell on this, but it's just your information. We have an affordable housing workshop, or a housing workshop scheduled for the 19th of January. But this is just to give you an indication of what your current program is for affordable housing. Dan?
Yeah, and that's a good lead in. We will be talking about this later, and again, we just wanted, there's been some concerns and discussion about affordable housing, and of course, Commissioner Smith has been probably the most vocal on that. But we have a impact fee subsidy program for qualified affordable housing. It's for owner occupied, so it's basically homes. What we've put up here is an example of how it works. In the blue part there, those are, if you look on the bottom, it says total fee. Those are the total fee that we're charging right now for impact fees. It's for a 3-bedroom, 2,000 square foot. It's $6,249. That's the total fee. The way the impact fee subsidy program works is, if you'll see in that yellow column, the top number there that says developer portion, or the home buyer, whoever's paying the fee, they pay $2,509. The county does the difference, which is $3,730. That comes from that $1.4 million that you've heard about a number of times here. That money goes towards making up that difference. It basically froze the amounts at pre-2004 levels. So then, in the green there, just as an example of what would happen if the new total fees went in place, they would go up to 8,335 for that house. So you can see that the developer or the homeowner, whoever's paying that fee, it would stay the same at $2,519, wouldn't change, but the county subsidy would have to go up based on the program as it's set up as we have it now. So we'll be having that discussion in January, but this does provide some insulation for those owner-occupied affordable housing things, that a fee increase will not impact that. It will impact the amount that the county has to subsidize, which means your 1.4 million will last not as
6
long.
months.
This doesn't have any school impact fees in it because this is the existing current. There's no existing current. But the way the program works is the school amount is also frozen at that pre-2004 level. If one were to come in place, it would be part of that program as well. So does that
You
make
got
sense?
questions?
Okay.
Commissioner Whitmore?
What is affordable housing nowadays? I mean,
I
what's
have-
the range? That used to be Ron Getman's big thing when I sat next to him.
I think Sherry will be able to
Sherry
talk
will
to you
have to
about
answer it
that
on the
this
record.
afternoon.
Higher than
Well,
you
I just
think.
want to know, like, what is an affordable house like? It
Like
was
191.
100 and something, and now I'm sure.
45, 140, it starts at 145 for very low,
That's the
up
low.
to 175,000
That's
for
what I need to know.
workforce. And as Dan mentioned, the subsidy then is assessed.
So 145 to 175. Got it.
that
Thank you.
range.
Thanks.
And Commissioner Baugh? I just, again, your chart is the northeast suburban area. So I am assuming when you get out east, which, there could be affordable housing there and should be affordable housing all over the county, the impact fees obviously are going to be higher as far as what the county would have to pay.
Yeah, the Northeast was chosen because it's the biggest one. We picked
highest.
one of the highest, excuse me, I'm sorry. The highest one. So we picked the Northeast.
Okay.
So the Southeast, the subsidy from the county would be a little less because the fee's a
Okay,
little
got
less
it.
than the
Gotcha.
Northeast, so.
I stand
It-
corrected. You're right. Thank you. Commissioner Smith?
Yes, Madam Chair. We keep talking about the $1.4 million. I have no idea on the $1.4 million, we're talking about affordable homes. How many affordable homes would that take care of? I mean, is it, you can give me a prescription for $1,500 and say I'm gonna take care of it, but I'm only gonna pay $50 toward it, and I can't get the medication. My question is 1.4 million. We haven't built a house since when? I mean, when the money has been dispersed, how do we know per house what the deduction would be? Does the board have to take additional action on that?
That is a good question. We have that workshop on housing in January. We can answer all those questions then, because today we'd be guessing. These impact fees that you're discussing today, because of the state statute, will not go into effect even if you approve them in December until April 1st. So we have time to talk about affordable housing, the 1.4 million, whether it should be more or less, how many houses it would cover,
Whether it
whether
should be
we would change it,
multifamily.
whether we would change it from just single family to multifamily, whether we want to talk affordable housing, or do you want to talk millennial housing? Do you want to talk about workforce housing? All of those are subjects for that meeting, and which one of those, if any, you want to subsidize. And thus, you would be changing your existing ordinance as it relates to the 1.4 million, and you would have time to do that before the implementation on April 1st.
Okay, and my question, I think Attorney Clegg had mentioned this here, dealing with affordable houses. The disbursement of a portion of whatever we may take in, put into that fund of $1.4 million, are we going to have someone in the housing who build affordable housing, since we don't have anyone designated that I know of that builds affordable houses for Manatee County, to tell us estimate, who do we have?
She's got, working with
Harvey's
somebody
gonna do
now.
it. I have my meeting tomorrow.
Yeah, but that's,
But-
it should be already here, what I'm saying.
Right.
You know,
Well, it's the marketplace.
Well,
I
yeah,
mean,
but my question-
Neil could build affordable housing at 175,
Well,
right?
and Charles,
Yeah.
I have worked in my previous
Yes.
capacity with affordable housing builders.
yeah.
They have built primarily multifamily affordable housing because they get tax credit. That's how they build it. They put together various funding sources, tax credits through the FD, whatever they're called. I can't even think what they're called. And they have come and said, oh my gosh, look at the impact fees in Manatee County. And Susie Dobbs used to be the person you would always go to, and she retired, so I'm not sure who took her place. But you would go to her and you say, well, what do you have for affordable housing? And for multifamily, for impact fees, we had nothing. So they built it, but that was a big chunk of change that they had to pay for impact fees. There was no relief for affordable multifamily housing.
Exactly. I've had about 6 different developers come in my office and tell me the same thing. But my question I'm trying to get to, when you look at government, most governments have someone, 2 people, whoever it may be. If we're, for example, 500 short, we got 2 people who build affordable houses. We more than that short. We don't have anyone designated on a list who we can say incentives. If you build affordable houses, this is what you're going to get. When we make a decision as a board, the disbursement of funds, I'm saying, I know people come in pitching stuff to us, but that's the private sector, which we should partner with the private sector. I'm
Right.
not saying we shouldn't. But we're not reaching out saying, hey, we need X number of affordable houses and get people on that list.
And we will talk about that. We do have somebody, but we got to get back to the impact fee thing. But we do have someone in the county that is specifically charged with that. And I want to say it's Denise. Anyways, we will learn, Charles. We will learn.
Denise, and I know Sherry Corrier, you're still not listening to what I'm saying.
Okay. Well, can we please defer that to the affordable
Because
housing
we're dealing with
discussion?
increase of impact fees, and I need to find out when we talking about the $1.4 million, who to say, should it be 2 million, should it be 4 million? That's what I need to know.
But it will not affect their impact fees.
It won't affect the impact fee. That is a board decision on whether you want to put money other than impact fees into that account.
Yeah.
And we can show you how all of that works in that housing workshop. But it won't be impact fees that go into that fund.
So that'll be a policy decision.
But you can set something up, as I just mentioned.
Yeah.
You can set something up and say, we're going to per house or whatever it may be, it'll be $100, for example, and it still don't cure the problem.
Sure, and we're going to talk about that, and you're absolutely right. We have not cured the problem with affordable housing. We all are painfully aware of that. Okay, keep going.
That was wrong.
All right, Commissioners, one of the things we need to get to now is what would we be recommending to you and why in the way of these impact fees? Now, one of the things of interest is, if you've read in the paper, the school board is talking about phasing in their impact fee, 50%, then to 75%, then to 100 over a 3-year period. I wanted you to know that there's a history of that in this county of phasing in because you don't want to disrupt the marketplace with a big increase all at one time. Back in 2004, the then board adopted an impact fee and then decided to phase it in over a 3-year period, starting at 73%. And then a year later, they were going to go up to 85%. And a year later, go to 100%. That's a phase-in. There's a
Never knew that.
precedent for doing that for the school board. Now, the board in those days set the fee at the 73%. A year later, they went to the 85%. And for some reason, 2 months later, rather than waiting a year, 2 months later, they went to the 100%.
Wait, we're looking at a slide.
Yes.
So shows it on June 19th. They went to 2004, they went to 73%. 2005, they went to 85%, and a year later, they went to 100%.
They were going to, but actually, it was 2 months later.
It was set out in that ordinance for 19 that it would be graduated that way.
Okay.
But they didn't actually do that.
Made a modification towards
That
the
June
end.
19th of 2006 actually took place in the summer of '05.
Oh,
Oh, okay.
Bill was
the-
here for that.
at probably
Meant by
the height of the market.
Yeah,
That's a
exactly.
controversial part, he said.
That's
Yeah,
interesting.
it was in the height of the hyper real estate market.
Yeah.
And we all sit back, close your eyes, and think about those days when
wish
people
we'd
were
never bought
flipping
property
houses
then.
as quick as they could get them built, or they'd buy it and flip it before it was ever built. But that drove the board to make the decision of the demand for infrastructure based on the amount of real estate transactions taking place was jumping at such a pace that they had to go to the 100% they felt. The
Excuse
point
me,
of this.
Ed, I'm sorry, I was here for it, so I remember. How could I ever forget? There was also a spike in infrastructure costs.
Yes.
FDOT was coming back with huge numbers for lane miles. All the concrete
yeah.
was going to China to build a dam. Nobody could get fill dirt. There were scandals over fill dirt. I mean, people were stealing dirt. And it was just a really crazy time. You couldn't build anything. We were getting like one bid. When we put out a road for bid, we'd get like one bid and we'd be stuck with it. It was a really tough time.
Yeah, thank you. So that's the history. There's another bit of history I'd like to share with you. Earlier in my career, in another place, we had an impact fee that was set at 100%. And a smart attorney for a builder found that there was a glitch in the formula. Went to court and won, and we had to start refunding money. And if you think about refunding money, it is such a difficult phenomena. It was actually a school impact fee that had the glitch in their formula and required us, by court order, to start refunding money. Well, then you have to figure out, who do you refund the money to? To the builder or to the homeowner?
Right.
And so, one at a time, and this is during that early 2000 hyper real estate market, that we had to, one house at a time, deal with the refund by bringing in the builder and the homeowner to look at their closing documents to see if they transferred the cost to the homeowner, in which case the homeowner got the refund.
Cost a fortune.
If it was silent, then the lawyers got involved, and at the end of the day, we had to figure out who was to receive the check, one house at a time. It was an enormous expense. We asked the school board to contribute to that cost, and they said, no, we don't have any money, so that was the county taxpayers, because you can't use impact fee money to do that processing of all those costs. That was general revenue of the county government that had to absorb the cost of that, and that must have taken at least 3 years to get through all of that. Therefore, I would recommend that you consider not going to 100%. You need to have a little wiggle room. That's a technical term. It's,
To avoid legal
if there
fees.
was a problem, you need to have a little room in there, because if you think of the impact fee calculation, as much as we hire specialists to help us with this business, it's based on assumptions. What's the cost of a road going to be? How many houses are going to be built? How many businesses? How much of this? How much of that? We have assumptions in there that we have shared based on good data that we have, but again, it's forecasting out the future. And I would suggest you just don't want to go to the very top in case there's something in there that doesn't play out to be exactly what we thought, is you ought to go something less than 100% to avoid the possibility of ever having to go through that refund business. So I would recommend you consider, for your discussion purposes, going no higher than 90% with your impact fee, and having the opportunity then that if somebody were to find something in the formula 2 years, 4 years down the road that isn't quite what we thought it was going to be, and they want to litigate, we have room so that we can avoid that refund business. That's just a personal experience, but it was a very difficult time to deal with those. Secondly, we're also looking, as I stated earlier, where we are to the other counties around. And you see in this chart, those to the left and those to the right. Those to the left, I know, and we know, have other revenues in the mix. We don't have those. Those to the right don't have other revenues in the mix, and so they're charging something, maybe not 100%, but they're going to be charging more of a full cost in their impact fee calculation. So at the end of the day today, I would recommend the board consider as we move forward, you don't have to make a decision today, but an impact fee that would be in the 90% range. 90% range will provide us the funds that we need to build what we need to build in the way of the roads. It will cover the cost of what we need for public safety. But when I say 90%, I'm talking 90% on each one of the fees that you levy. Parks, public safety, law enforcement, as well as transportation. And then we look at where we are in the marketplace, and Dan can take you through that. And with that, Dan, you want to take them through that?
Yes.
Well, I have a question on that.
All right, Commissioner Ball, then Commissioner Whitmore.
Yeah. You know, a couple of things. Talking about the history, Ed, I really appreciate your synopsis. What I would love to see, however, is a spreadsheet of the history of impact fees. Let's see what all has occurred over the years with impact fees. I think that is something I would love for staff to put together for all the commissioners before any decision, you know, before we go to vote. And the other thing is, with all due respect to the county attorney, who I have the highest esteem, I think we do have to think about Sarasota. They're right to the south of us. We're always working on different things with Sarasota. I think we do need to look at it. Might not be totally apples to apples, I understand that. They do have other fees, but that being said, let's not forget, the county administrator himself has given us a list of roads that cannot be repaired with impact fees, and it's over $1 billion. And so we're going to have to look at how, and that's why we have the committee that's being put together that the county administrator has wisely put together, so that we can look to see what we need to do to be able to pay for government in a smart way. So I am concerned. I think that impact fees, we have to be very careful with what we're looking at. We don't have the workforce back that we had before the recession. We're not totally back yet. I mean, I know that you guys have told me how we're not back to the figures on the revenue that we were at on impact fees before the recession. We have got to look at that and make sure that we're not hurting ourselves and that we are still competitive in the market so that we don't, as Betsy said, we want to make sure that we don't hurt anyone going forward. So I request that spreadsheet be done from the beginning of impact fees.
Could I just respond to that, please? Because I want to make sure it's clear that this office is not advising you against looking at Sarasota
say
at
that.
all. I mean, if
Say that.
And I certainly did not mean to imply that. We can learn some things from Sarasota.
Right.
But doing a head-to-head comparison of our fee structure versus theirs is an apples and oranges comparison.
Yeah, I want the board to recognize, there's a policy decision to be made on where you set your impact fee, and it's entirely appropriate for you as elected officials to be looking at what's going on in other jurisdictions, what's going on in your own jurisdiction. We've never advised the board against doing that, nor would we. And so I think staff was just raising the issue, when you make those comparisons, you need to take into consideration also the fact that the revenue picture differs from jurisdiction to jurisdiction.
Right.
And I think that's,
That's
Mickey, that's what you were trying to add to.
Yes.
But that's really a policy question, not a legal one.
And, Madam Chair, if I could just, you're absolutely right, Bill.
Thank you.
I do agree with everything that you said. The only thing, we just need to make sure that we understand that our market here, we need a predictable market so that people understand what they can do, how they can do it, what it's going to cost, and not sit back and look at our building department and say, well, I'm going to go over to Hillsborough because it's much cheaper there. Or I'm going to go to Pinellas because it's much cheaper there. We've got to be competitive, and that is what is concerning me about whatever amount this board decides to do. We've got to make sure that we're not hurting ourselves. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and it clearly is, as you said, a policy decision. One of these great big decisions that is in charge to us, just like the budget is in charge to us to set, It's the only mandate that, as I understand, that a county commissioner has, is to adopt a budget. And these impact fees, of course, are part of the budget because they fund capital improvements. But we have to think about how it is going to affect things. You know, it's interesting to me to see Hillsborough County being so low. I had the opportunity to go out to Baum, Florida, because I gave a proclamation to the Gulf Coast Research Center about their anniversary. And so I thought, well, I'm going to drive 301 all the way back from Baum, Florida, to see what's happening in southern Hillsborough County.
Where's Baum?
Baum, Florida. It is.
I missed it. I know there's 460-something cities, but I missed that one.
It's not much of a city.
It's a point on the map.
It's not much of a city. It's where the Gulf Coast Research Center that used to be, as you know, here in Manatee County 10 years ago, moved to
yeah.
Baum, Florida. So I was asked to go give the proclamation for their 90th anniversary, and I happily did so and got to see what they're doing out there. They have a lovely piece of property that Hillsborough County gave them. I did remark that we missed them here in Manatee County because they were a great asset. But driving back on 301, I was amazed by the amount of growth. 301 is 6-laned up there. 6-lane. I mean, you have shopping centers
should drive
and
that.
growth coming all the way down till you get practically down to the Little Manatee River Park. I was kind of shocked, to tell you the truth, by the amount of growth that is happening in southern Hillsborough County. Major developments. How the heck are they paying for road improvements? I don't know, because they have
Give
such
other
low impact
fees.
fees. So
Give
it
other
is
fees.
an interesting question.
Having spent some time there,
Yeah.
I'm aware that their impact fees have their studies, well, they haven't had many studies because their impact fee is probably the same as it was when I was there in the 90s.
They added millions of other fees.
And thus you can see in the news media, they're out looking for another penny sales tax for transportation. Because I think it was about 6 weeks ago, I read in the paper that in 2015, Mike Merrill, the county administrator, referenced that they had collected $2.4 million in impact fees.
That's
At our
enough.
current impact fee, we collected $11 million in 2015. Their impact fees are very low. They don't bring in much.
Commissioner Whitmore.
Well, okay, and Vanessa's right, we have to be competitive. Just look what Betsy just had mentioned, look at Sarasota. I have a stormwater utility, I looked at my tax thing last night, because we just all got our tax bills, and I paid $62 in my city for my stormwater impact fee. And that $62 paid for drainage. When I was there, dredging with every canal in the city that hadn't been dredged in 50 years, and now they're doing a drainage for the whole city, redoing the drainage for the whole city with that $62 per household or whatever they're doing. But, so that's just another form of revenue that other cities are using. Devil's advocate here, I'm just asking because we have historical knowledge up there, which is very interesting because none of us were here, and I wasn't here till the end of '06. You're recommending 90%, and I'm just asking, don't shoot the messenger, I'm just always trying to figure out something. What about what you had in 2004? First year 73%, second 85%, and third 100%. And the reason why I'm saying that, Ed, is because we don't know what's going to happen. But another thing is we're looking, and if anybody doesn't realize that, they haven't been being involved, but we are looking at other ways to have revenue streams. We can't rely on property taxes anymore. We are going to be looking at stormwater utilities fees. We are looking at franchise fees. We are looking at other revenue sources. But what would your thoughts be of, because it's consistent of what we did in the past during the boom. We're in the boom now. It would help us, and then we would be increasing it. But then, like you said, with this little glitch that happened where you were before, when you're finding that we don't need the 100%, then we can change it. And I know you and I talked personally about this before, that if those fees, we don't need them, we would, and because you can only use them if you need them, we would lower them. So what about graduating something like that's on the slide before us now?
Well, the board could choose to phase in, but you would need data about what to phase in. If you were to be, just an example, the school board, if they go forward with 50% to 75 to 100. If you said we wanted to go with 50% of our fee, that would result in us having to lower the current fee. I don't think that's what we're about. Because 50% of the calculated fee that we have before us today would make the fee lower than it is today.
What about 73,
well-
85 and 100,
At 75%,
75?
you're at break even. You're leaving the fee exactly what it is today if you went at 75%. We would bring in no money, additional money.
For
So-
transportation,
For transportation.
okay, but the others you would,
No.
just asking.
The
Yeah,
same.
they'd all be, you'd bring in no more money in each of the fees. The parks, the public safety, all of them would remain the same. That isn't going to work with the amount of infrastructure that we need to build in this county based on, if you look back 10 years ago, in your urban service area, the developers, because of concurrency, would have been building a number of roads. Today, with what the state has done with concurrency, there's not a single road in your urban service area that a developer is required to build. You're required to build it. That's why this fee is higher, is because over the last 6 to 8 years, the concurrency regulations have changed to the extent that the developers don't have to build, you have to build. And the fee needs to be corresponding to the assets that are required to be constructed. Any phasing in, because at a 90% fee is a 29% increase over what you have today. It would bring in roughly $4 million more a year across all 5 of your impact fees.
That's all?
$4 million more a year. At 90%. The fee, at a full fee, you would bring in $6.2 million more a year, and that's a 43% increase. But again, that comes with some degree of trepidation that there could be litigation down the road. If you wanted to phase in, at 80% would be roughly a 14% increase. At 85% would be a 22% increase. And at 90%, you're at a 29% increase. There's roughly $1 million difference between each of those in total fees.
This is, I'm having a hard time understanding this simply because, for example, on the industrial, we saw it was double, 100% increase.
Right.
So I'm lost how a 90% increase is only a 14% increase. So it's,
They want
I'm not real good with math in my head, so somebody might be able to explain that to me.
There's a bunch of different land use categories that these fees are calculated on. Mr. Hunzeker was talking about the entire total dollars generated by all the law enforcement, public safety, roads, and parks, the entire total overall in total dollars. But within all those land use categories, when the consultant does those calculations, they have to use the same methodology, and what comes out, comes out. And some of them, like some of those non-residential ones that we looked at, are the ones that are going up the most. Some are going up less. Some of the multifamily and some of the smaller stuff is either not going up much at all or very little. So it's all over the gamut between those different land use categories and the different sizes and things like that. But what Mr. Hunzeker talking about is overall, in total, that's what the
I didn't
total dollar
finish with that.
increase of all that would be.
All right, sorry, Carol.
That's okay, I didn't finish with Ed. I think we all know, and in our briefings, we probably all know, the skewing of all this money is that 44th. And that's why the fees have gone up what they did. It's like, and in whoever district zone that is, yeah. That's why you're seeing the high increase, but it's affecting all of our impact fees,
No,
just there.
I asked
And that's
that
why they went up so high,
I
but,
asked that question at the first workshop.
you know, unfortunately, this road was planned 30 or 40 years ago, and it seems like the people in their areas are really getting hit with it. I understand it's for them, but it's regional.
The fees on transportation are by district for the first time this time.
Right.
44th is a big driver within the southeast, but the southeast fee, even with 44th in it, is a bit less than northeast and northwest. So
I'm Dwayne Guthrie with Tischler Weiss. I think the complexity is that with those roads, you're planning to bond finance. So if you go much below the 90% staff has recommended, then you're going to have a problem of that the impact fee revenue won't be sufficient to make the debt service payments. And that's what we're kind of concerned about. So on that transportation fee.
but
So-
that only impacts that zone.
Correct.
And that fee for
Correct.
transportation.
Right.
Not the parks, not the libraries.
Correct. So there, because of that's the only one that we're basically committing big debt service payments for, that is in the back of our minds. And right now, we checked the math and the 90% would still cover the debt service, but if you phased in, you went to 50% or something like that, we'd be in trouble. We'd have to figure out some other revenues to make that happen.
Well, the point that I had made was 44th was not a good road to use because Mr. Malanazar had done a great report for us showing us the cost escalation for 44th because it's been built over time, started, stopped, had to acquire right away at higher costs, had to redesign it, I don't know how many times. So it was a very high ticket item when it comes to building roads because of some maneuvering by the government. I mean, it was an unusually high cost. But I think y'all came back with what answer when I said that? And Carol wasn't there, so. When I said 44th, because I have had people say, well, why are we basing the cost of constructing roads on a model that was something we would never want to replicate again and we should not build roads like we did 44th.
on the cost per lane miles, we're not using as the basis for the lane mile cost in the study those previous ones that did not turn out well. They're using their perspective based on the cost of the improvements that we know we're going to have to do on the remaining portions of 44th in those projects to construct them. That's what the basis for those lane miles is. For other lane miles not that road, there's a different formula and determination based on other road costs that we're seeing that does the average for the rest of the projects that are more of these ones that aren't the specific projects. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's what you told me before.
Glad I'm consistent.
All right, my eyebrows went up when the 90% that will be collected for the 44th will just pay for the debt service, so it'll not pay off the principal.
No,
debt
the
service.
principal and interest. With debt service is the comprehensive
Oh,
term
okay,
for those.
okay, I was just thinking, okay. So, to get back to the Sarasota, what was that new fee called that they? Mobility impact fee. So what exactly is that? Who pays? What's it based on? How's it collected?
Well, some of it is a branding that the state of Florida did a lot of studies and through several universities and came out with the idea to address some problems that unintended consequences of not only impact fees but concurrency. Let's look at them both together and suggest that might be a better way to do it, and that's when the mobility term came about. Now, some communities basically just changed the label on their cover and didn't change their fees and called them mobility fees. Some places like Pasco actually looked at their revenue structure and decided to use other revenues and buy down the fees like Dan had communicated to you. Other communities like Kissimmee, they actually, with their mobility fees, they use different trip links in the urban area versus the suburban area. So our impact fees have a lot of the same features that other communities have that calls theirs in mobility fees. So we have different trip links, urban versus suburban. We've looked at different types of improvements, like improvements to in the urban area, the southwest area. We have multimodal improvements for the urban corridors. So we have those same mobility kind of features, but we've looked at it and decided to not do away with concurrency. We might come back to you after the fees are adopted and suggest some fine tuning of concurrency provisions, but unlike Sarasota, which basically made the decision to do away with concurrency and go to a mobility fee, we're recommending a multimodal transportation fee, has a lot of mobility fee features. So it's basically a matter of semantics, which the courts are never too concerned about. They actually look at the specifics of what you're doing with the fee and how it's being called.
So,
You just said something that needs clarification.
Yeah.
We're recommending a multimodal transportation fee.
What is that?
This fee is what you're talking about, the fee that's recommended?
Yes.
Can be considered a multimodal transportation?
Yes, when we build new streets, they'll be complete streets. All modes will be included. And in addition to that, in the southwest, we are anticipating making some changes to the urban corridors. The impact fees only pay for a small percentage of that, but that is in the mix that we're actually going to go back and committing to making improvements to our urban corridors, much like the Sarasota approach, where they've identified two different types of corridors. We have a very similar feature in our fee too. We're just not calling it a mobility fee.
so is that fee only collected on new?
Correct. In all circumstances, mobility fees are only collected on new development.
On new development, but could be used for retrofitting existing? That's why you called it a different name, not just new roads?
It's new capacity.
Yeah, it has to be capacity adding. There are constraints. You can't go back and just fix problems. And so it gets to be the devil's in the details. So I'm not sure if you want to add anything.
Is it fair to say it has a little bit more flexibility than impact fees? That's what we were told at the MPO when Sarasota gave their
What's the
presentation.
difference? What's the difference?
For the record, Clark Davis, Transportation Planning Division Manager. The mobility fees and the multimodal impact fees do have built into them some ability to fund infrastructure, the bike lanes and sidewalks and transit facilities, but you have to make some findings that they're capacity adding some benefit and needs of new growth. So you couldn't go to an area of the county that's completely built out and find it easy to justify building a sidewalk in that area. But if it were a road that had some rural character to it, maybe, and new development were coming up beside it, didn't need capacity, but it needed that other infrastructure to support the needs, you could put a portion of it towards that. So it would be limited somewhat because it's just not a lot of capacity to be gained from those types of improvements at this time. But as over time, more transit use, more bike and pedestrian use, or in certain environments where you expect that to be higher, you might be able to justify doing a little bit more.
Okay. We're going to take a quick break. Hold your thoughts. I've been requested to have a quick break, so we're going to tell you we'll be back just a little bit after 11, take about a 5-minute break.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and reconvene. We were only scheduled to be fees, so this could be televised. Normally, our work sessions are held on the 4th floor. We have another item that is scheduled up on the 4th floor at 1:30, so we're going to try to get done as much as we can on this, and then we're going to have to decide what we're going to do. We're going to continue to talk about impact fees down here, then start a little bit later upstairs. That would seem to be what we're going to do, because it was advertised on the 4th floor, the discussion on economic development. And it's basically, what it is it's a 101 to make sure that everybody understands what we do in terms of economic development.
In our work with the EDC and your incentives and how they work.
And Madam Chair, I know we've already said that the biggest confusing thing is that's why people don't know, because it's not on TV. That's my concern. We're doing the same thing over again where people don't know what the incentives are. We haven't went over it. There's some question that's going to come up. I got constituents saying I don't want impact fees because it's going to affect affordable houses. Now we want to move upstairs and cut the cameras off, and now people are confused.
Well, we won't cut the cameras off on the impact fee discussion. There will be not.
No, but that's why I asked the question about affordable houses here. People want to build affordable houses, and some of my constituents want to know how would it affect affordable houses if you vote to increase the impact fee.
And
They're
we
not
said
going
it
to have a
won't.
discussion on housing, though.
Well, the
Presentation, what I'm saying, because you say it's not going to be broadcast. That's what I'm
Can we
making.
have the whole day here?
I don't know why it's not going to
We
be.
didn't schedule with METV for the whole day. We scheduled the impact fees, and we didn't schedule the whole day.
Just to answer specifically Commissioner Smith's question about how will the increase in impact fees affect affordable housing where we pay the portion. If I understand it correctly, the impact fees will be frozen at the level they're at today. The county portion will go up, but the portion charged to an affordable housing developer will not go up. Is that correct?
Correct.
What you said is correct.
Okay.
Madam Chair, we can move on and do what we want. I understand it. I'm saying the people who watching this don't understand it.
Well, hopefully what was just said was clear.
No, because we limit the conversation to this afternoon. That's what y'all said, until we're going to get a presentation about affordable housing and economic development. That's what I was told.
No,
Not talking
folks,
about affordable housing this afternoon.
That's in January.
January.
that's January,
Are we getting a presentation from Sherry or someone?
On economic
on
development.
economic development,
Hey,
not
and-
affordable housing.
Yeah, but economic development, you're going to be talking affordable housing questions going to be asked in the same scenario. I mean, I'm going to ask questions dealing with that.
Why don't we just, Madam Chair, why don't we
I
just
understand
have
what's
it down
taking
here?
place January the 19th. I understand that.
Hey, ask the METV if they can stay all day.
It's up to Charles. It's
There's
not
two
up to
things.
Chris.
Is this room available, and whether or not METV is willing to continue and televise it this afternoon under economic development. It's fine with me if we stay down here, but it's, if the room's available, and whether or not METV's available to film it.
We will check.
Wait, and we're almost done with what we have to present. I don't know what questions y'all
Okay.
have, so I just wanted to let you know.
Well,
Okay.
let's keep going, and we'll find out before we convene at noon. So let's keep going on impact fees. We got people who want to talk, I know, in the audience as well.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, that's where we went.
Slideshow.
Commissioner Baugh had,
Oh, I'm
we had
sorry.
people on the board that
Okay.
had questions, so.
I just wanted to bring back up 44th Avenue. So am I to understand that the transportation, the impact fees, what you've proposed them to go up to, is strictly just going to be to pay for 44th Avenue?
No.
Do I understand that?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
That's the big piece in that whole thing. It's a big road, and it's, as Dwayne said, it's being done over 20 years. So this is a 10-year look for impact fees, but we're bonding it over 20 years, and they need to pay, the first 10 years, the impact fee is just paying for the first 10 years of debt service on the road, and impact fee, people in the future payers would pay going forward the last 10 years.
So I wish, I would like a statement or something from you guys showing what it's costing us now that I know the impact fees are paying the bill for the bond, on the work that's already been done. Is that correct? No?
No bond.
What's been done so far?
Okay. With 44th, we have portions of 44th that are under construction right now, are being bid and about to start, and those go all the way out to 45th.
Right.
And then, so those are all part of what's being done. There are some portions of what we're borrowing that is paying for pieces of those roads, relatively small amounts in the scheme of things. And then for 44th, from 45th Street east out to Lakewood Ranch, the big new part over the river and
Bridge.
over the
Bridges.
interstate. That portion is in there and is projected and planned to be done and paid for out of the southeast,
Okay, out of impact fees.
out of impact fees, and borrowed and then paid back out
But
of impact fees.
as it stands today, the impact fee money that we bring in, which I think you said, I'm sure it's not just transportation, but it was 11 million. I mean, are we bringing in enough right now on transportation fees to pay for 44th, for whatever the payments might be on the bond? Do you know?
Just say yes.
I would say no, not. It would require the increases to be able to do that. That's what they're based on, is paying for that, plus those additional roads that we expect to need in that area.
Okay. All right. Again, I know that this is probably not something that you guys really want to do, but I really do want to see a history on impact fees, because most of us up here on the board, now weren't around for the majority of the time on impact fees. So I'd kind of like a history of how they've gone and, increased, decreased, whatever, over the years. I would like to see that. One more thing. And, I know we were talking about developers a few minutes ago, and it keeps coming up, and I know you've got some blogs and some people that always talk about the developers not paying their way. The developer isn't the one that's going to be hit with impact fees. It is the homeowners, it is the businesses that are building, not the developers. The developer pays it ahead of time, but they get their money back. So I just wish people would, I don't think we can say that enough, because people don't want to see that as a fact. They only want it to be that bad developer, who's not wanting increases in impact fees. It's the people that end up paying it. So just wanted to stress that one more time. Commissioner Smith.
Yes, could you go over again? I know you was, the county administrator was mentioning about this sliding scale. Could you go over again, if it's 50%, my understanding, if we say a sliding scale starting at 50%, that's a decrease in what we're collecting now. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. If we were to do it at 50%, it would be less than what we're collecting now,
Is that as a total?
as a total.
So we
Not
actually,
necessarily on any individual category, but as a total.
okay, so we'll be lowering it. Okay, I want to get that off the table then. Now, the sliding scale, I haven't seen if we're talking about a sliding scale, and I know you didn't mention that, Mr. County Administrator, it was mentioned from the dais. And I think you kind of went over the percentage. Now, I'm to understand that if we take in 90%, that it'll be a little over $4 million a year only in impact fees? Is that wrong?
$4 million increase,
More than what we're collecting.
more than we're collecting today.
Okay, 4 million,
Million a year then, right, instead of 11 million?
And that doesn't include the school impact.
No, just your impact fees that you levy today, we collected $14.5 million. If you raise the fee but only collect, or if you move to a 90%, you would collect an additional 4.2 million.
That's 18
That would take 14 up to 18.
million,
additional $4.2 million per year, correct?
Yes, across all impact fees.
And
Schools, or not schools, parks, public safety, law enforcement, and transportation.
Okay, and that money there, the $4.2 million would be sufficient with your study of 90%?
It will still, yes, it'll meet the debt service if that's what you're asking.
Yes, it'll meet the debt service still.
How much over?
Yeah. And depending on market conditions and inflation, right now, inflation is very low. We don't see the need for projecting out big expenses and big changes in cost. But we have the opportunity at any point in time to come back to you and revisit this business of impact fees based on where the market goes. Right now, we're making assumptions out for 10 years. We're pretty good at forecasting out a year or two, and you start getting out to year 8, 9, and 10, it's an educated guess. And because of the educated guess is why I recommended that maybe you just want to go to 90%.
And this money is supposed to be used to build future roads.
Roads that increase capacity needs. We have, as published before, roughly $1.4 billion worth of existing roads that have some functional deficiencies that need repair. We can't use impact fees for those.
But,
Did I get that right, Bill?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Commissioner Baugh.
I'll wait, go ahead.
Commissioner DeSabatino.
But also the other fees, not transportation, the parks, EMS, public safety, sheriff, all those, possibly libraries and admin,
Yeah.
can be utilized for
New.
New.
Only for new capacity driven by new growth. We
Right.
can't take, for example, impact fees and do any major refurbishment of GT Bray Park, which is in the urban core, unless there was some new growth that's driving that. Just remodeling, you can't do it. The discussion we had during the budget, when I pointed out that for over 20 years, we've built parks, and in 20 years, all those parks have playground equipment. And the playground equipment, after 20 years, is wearing out. It's rusting. It's becoming unsafe. We cannot use impact fees to replace what impact fees paid for originally. We need another funding source to pay to replace those park equipment.
Okay,
That's
and-
what we're struggling with.
And then the impact fees can only be used for capital improvement projects for the sheriff and for the libraries and,
Yes,
No
it's
staff.
capital
Not
costs. We can't
people.
hire any people.
right?
It can be capital equipment, it can be their vehicle and some of the related expensive equipment that goes towards that, but equipment and capital project type
That's,
things.
if I could, that's the challenge we had for the pool that we talk about periodically north of the river. We had impact fees available to build the pool, but at the same time, we were laying off employees during the recession, and we didn't have anybody to operate the pool or the money to pay for the electric bill, the water bill, the chemical bills. All those operating costs, which were estimated to be in the $500,000 range, were to be funded with property taxes, general revenue, which was quickly going down. And that's why we had to suspend the concept of building the pool, because we didn't have the funds to operate it.
Can I finish? Really appreciate the study you do, and, because costs are going up, but, you know, we can't be short-sighted. In the long run, it will be beneficial for everyone, because without having the money available for the schools, hopefully, and for the roads, and for the libraries and parks, that will decrease the quality of life, and we don't want to decrease the quality of life. So we want to make sure that we improve the quality of life for everyone. And I know wherever we go, roads, infrastructure, sidewalks, streetlights are on everyone's priority list, and traffic. So we just need mechanisms to pay for the new growth, and then find other mechanisms to pay for that $1 billion of roads that are existing to service those as well. So that'll be the $1 billion question, right?
Correct.
You hit it right on the head.
Commissioner Russell, yeah.
Miss Budget girl here.
Commissioner
you-
Russell.
Could you tell us one more time what the crossover point was? Is it 70% or 75?
70% appears to be the crossover point on your impact fees, that
Okay.
any lower than 75%, you would be reducing the current fee.
No, it's not good.
No, we
So
don't want
just
to do that.
speculating, would a phased-in approach, 70, 80, 90, would that work? Would that achieve our objectives?
We'd have to have 75 at least.
I would suggest if you were even thinking of a phased-in approach, you'd be looking at the range of 80 to 85 to 90, which would be
Okay.
sufficient enough to fund
Wiggle room.
initially while we're doing the design phases and the right-of-way acquisition and the permitting. We could get by with a lower number, and as fee increases or other revenues came into play, we could move up. But eventually, we're going to need the 90% level coming from impact fees or a combination of impact fees and other revenues to support the capital items that are necessary in the community.
Right.
For example, the debt service or the park needs, or you could lower your level of service. And I'm not so sure that is a discussion the board wants to get into. But to meet your level of service and to meet the needs that are out there in the community, you have to have some combination of revenues and/or impact fees to put those assets in place.
Okay, so 80, 85, 90, that would achieve our objectives as far as projected growth and the need for infrastructure.
Funding the needs that are out there, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, I have just one little question.
Okay, sure.
Can you, I know that previous boards have approved a phase-in approach, and then they changed the phase-in approach, so that would still be available to us as well.
Yes, sir.
That's what Ed
Yeah.
said they
Yes.
did in the past.
And to follow up on that question, let's say for some reason, and probably not foreseeable, but for some reason, the costs were to drop.
You can
You
do
know,
it.
We would be,
We could lower them under this study, right?
We did before.
Under this study, you could lower them, but you can't raise them. Is that correct?
We did it before.
Legally, you cannot raise them above the 100% maximum chargeable amount in the study. You do have flexibility beneath that number to raise or lower them. It is a legislative decision of the board,
Okay.
as long as that study remains relevant and viable. At some point, it goes stale,
Right.
but that would be years down the road.
Right, okay. You finished, Larry?
Oh, good.
Okay. Commissioner Ball?
Yeah, 80, 85, 90 is, I have not seen enough to make sure that I'd want to go that high and put us the third highest in our area. I think that that hurts us be competitive. I think it's going to hurt us with economic development. I think it's going to hinder people that can afford to buy homes here, new homes, and I think it's also going to affect people that might want to open a business. I would need to see more documentation from staff on the amount of revenue that would be generated on the transportation fees, particularly when you're talking about 44th Avenue. I'm going to have to see more documentation to show that to raise us to the third highest county in this area, the justification, the reason that that is so necessary, because I don't see it. And what bothers, and don't forget the spreadsheet on the history of impact fees. And the reason that I'm really concerned about this is because I know, and we all know, all the county commissioners, staff, everybody knows that there's other things that we're going to have to look at for funding, such as existing roads that cannot be corrected with impact fees. That is a huge concern that we have got to look at and come up with solutions. So with everything that the county, the staff and commissioners are looking at, I'm very concerned about raising impact fees this high to be the third largest, most expensive county in our area. That is a big, big concern to me. So I really need a lot more information than what I've received so far.
Commissioner DeSabatino?
I'm actually on the opposite end of that. I think that the study shows that we need to have them at a certain level. If we do the 75 to 80, we're not increasing anything substantially. My question would be, what would be the revenue lost in 3 years if we phased it in? And then one could argue on the other side that if you are less this year than the next 2 years, they're going to say that they were overpaying. So even though it's still less, I just think it just should be a flat out fee and keep it consistent because, the study warrants it.
Okay, Commissioner Smith?
Yes, Madam Chair. You look at the whole scenario, the biggest thing that we have before us is the fact that we're going to have to create some incentives. I understand why Commissioner Barr is saying that, but at the same time, I have studied this issue, and this is not the first impact I've been through. And what I do know, that if we don't do it like it should be done and accept the data before us, that our constituents are going to be roads. We're going to have to pay for it. That's the bottom line. If you look at the 90% and you look at what the revenue being brought in, the 50% is lowering it. The 75%, you're breaking even based on with the data. The county administrators say, well, 80, 85% at the minimum. But, I mean, I don't know how you get around it. I'm talking about economic development, affordable homes. But the facts are, if we don't do something now, all our constituents pay for roads. And I would like to see the other data too that got us to this point dealing with impact fees, but I don't have to be an economist to understand that we're gonna have to do the 90 at this point based on the question, the data that I have. Anything lower means it comes out of all our constituents' pocket for future roads. And even the 4.some million is not a whole lot of money. I mean, that's what's stunning me more than anything. That it's not a whole lot of money to build roads. My constituents question impact fees, but at the same time, they have no intention of paying for roads to be built for anyone else. We don't even have roads and sidewalks in our district now. So we're not going to be caught with that trap. I put the 50% out there because I needed to be on the record that 50% was not feasible. It's a decrease because that's been mentioned by people who talked to me. I received phone calls from individuals dealing with the percentage. So I agree with Commissioner DeSabatino. We're going to have to, well, this commissioner is going to have to vote to support this and pray that we have incentives to deal with economic development and business and affordable houses. So I'm going to have to kind of support that because I can't see me doing anything less than that. I think it'll be an uproar across the county with the numbers. I can't dispute it. I can't dispute what he's saying. I can't dispute the legal advice Attorney Clegg has given me. And I disputed it in the office. When I met with him, I was pushing back and forth. So for me not to support, I got to have some evidence even to prove otherwise, and I don't have it.
And I'm just going to comment on what you said, and you make a really good points, Charles. But the reality is other places have lower impact fees because they do have other revenues.
That's correct.
That are paid by sales tax, basically.
That's correct.
The infrastructure, I've had people ask me, why does Sarasota have better roads than Manatee County? That's a darn good question. Why does Sarasota have better roads than Manatee County? Because they've had an infrastructure surtax for how long to help build roads? Clark, approximately. Clark worked there, so I can ask him this question.
For the record, Clark Davis, Sarasota County adopted their surtax, I believe, in 1989. So it's been in effect essentially since 1990.
Okay, there you go. More money equals better roads. More money that is not only and obligated the way impact fees are. I mean, you got to remember, impact fees have pretty strict requirements about where they can be spent and where they can't be spent and what they can be spent on. And it's the issue that I've kind of had all along. It's just, it's the idea that all of our road problems are going to be solved by people that aren't even here yet. I really have a hard time with that thought. Yes, I understand exactly how the study was done. Well, of course, I shouldn't say that. I understand you did the study correctly and that we can rely on it. Let me put it that way. And I think that's a good thing. But it's just, we're just missing something. We're just missing something to be able to deal with roads. So I'm torn. You guys are all making great points. I'm sorry, interrupted. I'm going to keep going. Commissioner Whitmore was up next.
Well, and consciously, if we went at 75%, we'd be where we are today. And what Commissioner, well, it's the facts. I mean, our people that we pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for tell us that.
In aggregate. It's an aggregate number. So some people will go up.
So I know, I saw the chart. I saw the chart. But what Larry was saying, and I wrote all these stuff down as people were talking, but we are the third highest because we have no other revenue source. It's all that we all seven of us probably agree on that, correct? What Sarasota, and I'm just using Sarasota, and Ed helped me because other counties this, the surtax for the roads, was that legislative where they just could vote on it, or was that referendum?
Referendum.
Okay, stormwater?
Legislative board action.
And that takes a year, almost a year study to do, because I did one in our city, and I think John, everybody has one. We all you have to do it by study. Every property in the whole county gets identified, and that's how you determine how much you pay. And that is a long study. Even churches, everybody has to pay. Infrastructure, Sarasota, was that legislative or?
Well, infrastructure sales surtax is what we're talking about, and that requires a referendum. That's the only one that requires a referendum.
And the
If I-
mobility fee,
That's same thing, and that's
legislative.
legislative.
So what you've seen in the past is Sarasota, and only because it was mentioned, and I'm sure Tampa has done all these fees to pay for things that we desperately need and don't have.
Correct.
Now, in good conscience, how could we sit up here for the last year or two and say we're doing a impact fee? We have to, and people come up, yell at us, and unjustly yell at us, and tell us that we need to do something. We say we have to have a study. And then if we have a study and don't do anything, and that's what I was disappointed when I heard the school board. I mean, unfortunately, we're up here to make the hard decisions no matter what, and we're here to make the hard decisions for everybody. My talks to Ed too were, we know if that we could get some of these other fees in place and be in 2015 like everybody else, that these impact fees could go down, but right now they can't. So, but again, I'm one for consensus, I'm one for compromise, and I can't do the 75% if that's what you guys are telling me, that nothing would change. I could go up higher to 90, 80, 85, 90. But, I mean, we got to be fair to the citizens. We're up here because we were told them we would look at it and we would make our decisions on that. I understand it's going to hurt the development community. I understand it's going to hurt the builders. And again, what Vanessa says is 100% right. It's the person buying the house is the one that's going to get it. And we all understand that. There's somebody sitting at this dais down there that I was talking to about a house a few years ago during the height of the season, paid over 20-something thousand in impact fees. So I get it. But we also have to be fair to the people that are not new buyers of homes and the stress that the new development takes. So I've never had a qualm. I mean, I like social service. This world, it's part of the job. But we did tell the citizens that we would look at the studies and make a hard decision. Vanessa's 100% right. This could affect economic development. But until we get our act together with other revenue sources, we're kind of in a pickle here. So, and let me tell you, Ed will tell you, a stormwater fee that actually Ed brought up to us 2 or 3 times in the last 4 or 5 years that I know of. And we were at work sessions and we all told him no.
It was in the comp plan for about 10 years.
Yeah, and Ed's brought that
then it got
up.
taken out of the comp plan.
He's brought franchise fees up to us, utility fees, and stormwater, because he knows how it's done. And we as commissioners were in work sessions, and it stopped there. And now it's kind of like where we talk about infill projects where we have to make the hard decisions. We've got to start doing that. And I paid $62 for my stormwater utility fee on my taxes this year. That's nothing. So we have to look at other revenue sources. But again, this impact fees, we all have to, every city in the county has it except for the county, Manatee County. So we need to look at we need to really get serious and not backtrack if we decide we're going to do that, and listen to the public. But those other counties the reason why we're the 3rd highest is because we have not done what we needed to do.
And let me clarify, it was in the comp plan, was taken out way before I was on the board. I want to clarify that. That was not a comp plan amendment that I had anything to do with.
If I could, I just checked this morning. I believe it was 1991, the board adopted a stormwater ordinance. And typically what you will see is hand in hand with the stormwater ordinance is a stormwater fee. The fee part never happened. We've had an ordinance, you've had an ordinance on the books about stormwater since 1991, but we haven't had the fee to go along with it.
So we have it still?
Oh, yeah, you've got an ordinance out there.
There's tons of stuff on the books we haven't enacted. I've seen it myself.
But you can enact an ordinance without the fee, but it's kind of odd.
And it was a policy that the fee was supposed to be adopted in the comprehensive plan, and then it was taken out sometime in the 90s.
Yeah.
I believe it was in the 90s. I can't remember, the 2000s. Mr. Chappie.
Yeah, Carol touched on just about pretty much what I was going to say for the most part. I did have one question, though, with the 8 other comparisons here. How many of them are in the process of going through an impact fee study?
That was fast.
Well, we could call them up and ask them. John, do you know?
I think it's kind of important. I know Vanessa is saying we'd be in the top three, but I don't know what's being proposed in these other communities
Whether they're going.
for a true comparison.
Yeah.
I would hope it's a true comparison
Right.
if it was
Well,
brought
but
to
they
us.
might be changing.
They might be changing it. That's my question.
You may do doing us.
And Madam Chair, John Osborne, the ones we have comparisons in the tables today are the current 2015 studies. The most recent one that adopted theirs is Sarasota County with their mobility fees. During our research, we didn't recognize anybody or made it aware in their website where we did the research that they said they were embarking or when anything was underway. But there was a few that were recently adopted, including Sarasota, but then there was also some that were like Hillsborough that were from 2002. So there's and everything in between.
I'd like to know, you know, since we're using these guys as comparisons, I'd like to know what these other counties are doing, if they're doing studies.
So we could just ask if they're doing studies, what you want
In
to
the
know?
process, at the beginning.
How about our consultant? Do you have any idea?
What,
Well, I know Hillsborough County is studying theirs right now, so I don't really know where they're at in the process, but they are finally looking at
Fun.
them.
Madam Chair, there's a Florida Association County meeting coming up, and the county administrators will be meeting. I'll pose the question to them as to who's in the process of doing a study.
Okay. Anything else? All right. Mr. DiSabatino.
Right, and Sarasota's study, you know, they spent the money on a study, and then it decided, I believe, only to enact half. So,
Of what? Impact?
of the recommended fee, correct?
I don't.
School board?
I think that was
School board.
School board,
only.
okay.
Yeah,
Well, that's a school board fee
Has
as
to be
adopted
adopted by
by
the
the
county.
county commission
right.
at 50%.
Okay.
No, it was a school board adopted at 50%.
Yeah.
But they have to, don't,
But
I don't
that's-
think
but-
the
But the
commission
county
has
had
adopted
to enact the 50%.
yeah, we have to.
But it was a school board that actually adopted
Yes.
this study at 50%, and then I don't even know if the commission's taken action on it.
Okay, so, I have to say,
Oh, in Sarasota, sorry.
Whitmore, I agree with you 100%, a red letter day.
Hold up,
Yeah, a
wait.
red letter day here.
Let me take a picture.
Yeah, I take a picture.
Let me get your picture, hold on.
Well, take it together, put it on Facebook.
Well, the meeting's not over yet. so-
I know. The day is young.
Just on this one specific.
Yeah, just on this issue. And I understand where Commissioner Ball is coming from, that a standalone issue for impact fees, we are third. However, when someone's coming in to build a new business and extend their building, they're not just looking at the impact fees, they're looking at the whole picture of what it's gonna cost. So they're not just gonna say they're not gonna come here because our impact fees are 2,000 higher, when our other fees that you talked about, the franchise, the stormwater fees are less, or we don't have them. So you have to compare apples to apples. And so, I agree, you know, we pay for these studies, and, these are professionals that use the data. And so I think that,
Actually, the new homeowners pay for it as part of the fees now.
oh, okay, okay.
If you approve it.
All right, and so, but we have to be careful, and we have to remember that the state has changed the rules and changed the game, that we have to pay for the roads, for the new growth. And I'm just thinking about the recent decision on the Robinson Gateway thing. We're gonna have to spend a lot of money on those roads. So, you know, we just have to make sure that we've got funding in place and a funding stream in place. Something that wasn't addressed here regarding other fees or other sources are, you know, asking the taxpayers on next year's election, asking them if they would pay for half or a quarter of cent sales tax for roads, infrastructure, sidewalks, and so forth. So you'd have a funding stream that everyone paid. Our tourists would pay, they're using our roads. And so I think that's the question that we need to discuss at the financing workshops and so forth, if that's an appetite. And I think, I've talked to people around the county in all walks of life, and the roads and infrastructure are the biggest concern that they have, and capacity, and sitting at 3 deep at a light for 3 signals. So if you ask people if they would pay a half-cent sales tax or a quarter-cent sales tax for roads and infrastructure, I haven't had one person say no.
Their neighborhoods, that's right.
In all neighborhoods, in all walks of life. So, they want the sidewalks, and then in turn, you're helping the safety. So then you would actually be helping, the law enforcement. So by having the roads and having the sidewalks and having the streetlights that Commissioner Smith is saying, you'll have a funding stream for that, and then you develop a plan for that, and just like the CIP.
Yeah, and I mean, Robin, you're right. It's the total picture that we have to look at. We can't just look at these things in a vacuum.
But as Commissioner Whitmore said, once we get these funding streams in place, which is not going to be today and it's not going to be tomorrow, then if we determine that we don't need all the roads for new growth, you can kick it
We have
back.
another
You can
funding
walk
stream.
it back. So,
Another
once you
funding
have the other things in place and you have a funding stream
Right.
that improves the quality of life, you have a funding stream for parks to replace the equipment, then we're not behind the eight ball all the time.
Right, and I think that's why we're having this committee, to look at funding streams, to look at what the options are. And that's what makes this kind of difficult to make this decision. Because let's say we go to the 90% impact fees, and by the way, we also get recommendation that we're gonna have an additional sales tax, we're gonna have all these other additional revenues. My concern is the total picture has now made Manatee County, where we're pretty cheap now, maybe the most expensive place to live. I mean, we have to be very careful. It's a balancing act, so that's why it's hard to look at the total picture. But I certainly agree that those are things that are on the table that we're looking at, We can't say that Sarasota County gets their roads for free if they've been paying for them since the 80s with an infrastructure surtax. You
And-
get what you pay for.
And what would be our deadline to come up with referendum questions?
Oh, I'm not going to guess.
Okay.
It would be
By
sometime,
statute, but we'd have to look at the statute.
sometime in the spring.
Okay, so it gives us time when that task force comes back,
I would assume somewhere, because, I mean, to get on the ballot, you gotta be,
a couple months out.
Probably need
by
to check with
June,
the
right?
the supervisor of elections on that.
Madam
Right.
Chair, it's generally, it is controlled by the supervisor's schedule, and the general rule is a few months in advance of the election day on which the referendum is going to be presented to
Right.
the voters.
Right, and he has to send out those questions in
He
advance.
does, and you normally just sit down with him and discuss his costs and such things.
I would say at least by June, probably, since. Commissioner Baugh?
It's good conversation going on here, and Robin, I'd have to say some things you say I agree with, some I don't. What bothers me is that I wrote this down, we desperately need and don't have funding. Carol said that. I agree with that 100%. But I also know that if you keep doing the same thing, the way you've been doing it, you're gonna have the same results. We have over $1 billion worth of roads that cannot be fixed with impact fees. I'm really concerned about that. And now we're talking, and I know this has been mentioned before, about a referendum on the ballot for infrastructure, road infrastructure. That probably is something that we're gonna really have to have serious conversation about, as much as I hate to say it. I think it's probably something that we're gonna have to discuss. New growth has been basically covering things where the residents that live here today aren't, because of the increase in taxes that the residents pay. We have the impact fees, and that's been a nice asset. But, how far can you take it before you're hurting yourself? That is my concern. When I ran for office, it was about economic development, job creation. I'm not going to do anything if I think that we're going to hurt ourselves with those areas. I am concerned about the amount and being the third highest in our area. Yes, I know Sarasota has other fees, and I also know that the county administrator has said that that is something that we're going to have to start looking at. I agree. We do need to start looking at it. Do we need to impose all of them? Don't know that that's the case. But it is something that we have to be open-minded about and look at. My concern on these impact fees is that we're just going to continue to do the same thing we've been doing, and we're still not addressing the other issues that we have. So we're going to put ourselves the third highest in the area. And then we're going to institute other fees on top of it. Where does it stop? We're going from being one of the lowest counties to live in to definitely probably one of the highest. My concern is not the developer. My concern are the residents that want to build and have new homes, that can't afford it if we keep pricing them out of the market. That is my concern. That's why I've asked for all this additional information, because I think the time has come when we need to immediately look at other areas that we need to possibly start funding, to raise impact fees up 100% or up to 100% in 3 years. We're sitting back looking at other fees that need to be charged, and we're going to do that too. I just think that we're jumping too fast to make this decision on having impact fees that high.
Well, that's why I kind of like the idea of the staggered and the 80%. So the question I would have is, can you show us at the 80% level? We heard 75% is about even. If we went to 80%, if we went to 80% at, and then 80, and the 85, and the 90, recognizing that if impact fees
Other
are
fees,
it,
right.
we might need to make a change, whether or not that would work. So that's what I'm asking, if we could get documentation that
We
would
can
show.
provide you that.
Okay.
Plus the bonds, remember he mentioned the
And-
bonds.
No,
When-
yeah, I'm including the entire picture.
When we,
fiscal picture.
when we show you 80, 85, 90, we'll show you the impact of how that relates in the competitiveness on this chart. We'll show you the ability to cover the debt service. We'll show you what percentage increase that is over current fees and how much additional revenue that will bring in. It'll be a comprehensive look for you to see, so that when you get this information and you have it on your agenda in December, you can make the decision as to what you want to do.
I'd like to see it at 70 too.
70%.
70 is right where you are.
That's
Today.
less than what we're paying today.
Well, I'd like to see the documentation on that to verify that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
It sounds good, but show it to me.
we can do that.
Show me the
Here,
money.
Whitmore.
Well, okay, now, don't everybody freak out, but this is a lot of information, and we all have in our mind what we know what needs to be done to get everything in place. We've all mentioned the revenue sources. We all know that. Is it, and I think this is going, and, I look at the meetings when they come to us. I don't go ahead and know all the plans. I just, as I get my work assignments, I go step by step. I'm methodical like that. Isn't this going to the planning commission? Next
Thursday.
week? Well, okay, here's my question. Kind of where we're all coming from. I don't think it's fair to bring it to the planning commission next week when we've kind of got ideas what we would like to see it happen before it go to planning commission. And I know you're all on some major time schedule that everything has to be in order, but I would rather it be delayed and have another work session like this for us before we take it to planning commission. And please don't all have a heart attack.
They have a different
I
realm
already
of
know, I can tell.
They have a different realm of responsibility. With them, we're really focusing on the development projections, the demographics that has all the multipliers that go into the fee calculations, the levels of service standards. They're not approving or making a recommendation on the dollar amounts. They're really checking the things that are for consistency with the comp plan, and that's their focus is compatibility or consistency with the comp plan.
Well, in that resort, I would rather, and here again, don't flip out, please, and I'm sorry, I don't want to cause any problems, but why couldn't we have another work session with the planning commissioner to hear what you're telling the planning commission? I mean, I can come and sit in the audience, but our schedules, we'll be in Jacksonville next week. I mean,
It's Thursday.
yeah, it's next week.
It's
Yeah,
this
but
Thursday, right?
Yeah.
It's
Oh, is
this
it this
week.
Thursday?
Yeah. This Thursday?
It's this Thursday.
Oh,
I have it on my schedule.
Yeah, it's just that in all fairness to everybody, it would be so nice, like we do with the Children's Advisory Board, we're all on the same page. I know you say they're doing different things, but as you're hearing from Vanessa and others, I want more information. I don't support the 75% right now. I think it should go higher, totally. I mean, we've told our citizens that, but I want to have the numbers, I want to have more information to demonstrate to the citizens, to the business community, and I want to be able to have that flexibility to say, you know what, if we get all these other fees, and if you work with us to get these other fees, those impact fees will go down, because we'll have other revenue sources to do other things. I don't have all that comfort right now. We're sitting in rooms, talk to individual people. I would rather, can't talk to all these guys except up here.
Well, Carol, we're not going to know the answer to that question about other revenue fees. We are not going to know that impact fees are going to go down because the $1 billion shortfall that we have, I mean, you know,
Right.
we're going to have to, I believe, we're going to have to act on impact fees and then follow through on the other
Separately.
revenue sources.
Yeah, I agree on that.
We can make changes, we can go down if we need to, but you know.
It's just an idea.
As you said, Carol, and I agree with you 100%, we have told people that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna have this study, and we're gonna act on it. We're gonna act on doing impact fees. We recognize that things are very different than they were in 2011, very different today. They're not what they were, thank goodness, in 2007 and 2005. They're different. So we have to make some changes. You know, it's up to you guys if you want to continue this. You know, I asked for the second workshop because I knew you weren't at the first one, and I knew Larry wasn't at the first one, and I knew we had a lot of questions, obviously. So you weren't able to be at the first one.
Right, I didn't.
So, you know, it's
I
a
had all the
question on
information.
how you guys feel, if you can go forward. Commissioner Smith?
Chairman, could I just interject, please? I do have to advise against mixing the Planning Commission and Board at this point. This is a Land Development Code amendment that's scheduled for the Planning Commission Thursday. It is an ordinance amending the Land Development Code, and so we need to handle that as a separate process where the Planning Commission makes a finding of consistency with the comprehensive plan. In terms of your schedule and how many work sessions you want to have and when you want to do this, that is up to you. But we do need to keep that process separate, just as we would with any other ordinance amending the Land Development Code. We're at the point now where it's been advertised and scheduled, and it is a separate part of the process.
And they are looking at it completely different than you are.
Yeah,
You're
what's
looking
the
at the
take?
fees and the implications
Right.
and the cost to the payer. They're not looking at any of that. They're looking at
Applies to the comp
consistency
Right.
with the comp plan.
Right.
And I think it's about time we started using our planning board like that. I don't think we have in the past that much.
Oh, yes, we have, because it's required by state law.
Oh.
So I'm going to take objection with
With
what you
regards to
said.
this, I think we haven't done
Yeah.
this before with impact fees, have we, with the planning board?
I'm sorry, I missed your question. You're saying that have they, it's,
I thought you said earlier that the planning board didn't do this during, they changed the statutes, or?
no, it's with respect to school impact fees, because those are not in the Land Development Code. Those are in the county's Code of Ordinances. That has not historically gone to the Planning Commission.
Okay.
All of our impact fees
Have.
always have,
Right.
because they have been set forth in the Land Development Code. I guess the exception would be the FIFs, which are also in the Code of Ordinances, but we're trying to get those to go to PC now as well. So-
Good.
All right. Commissioner Smith, you're up next.
Yes, Madam Chair. You know, they've mostly answered most of my questions, and the thing that I'm looking at is we took 10% off, we did 90
Right.
already, so 10% is off. It's not what we came in here with. I was going to start at the 50. You already told me you're decreasing it, so I'm not going to do that. And it's a 75, and I know the situation is that. It's the same. So that's why I'm saying what I'm saying. Now, saying that, impact fee will almost have no effect on District 2. It's not like they busting the door down pulling permits to build houses there.
Some of your district too.
Some of it is.
We just
yeah.
approved it the other day.
Right.
Well, it was a rezone deal, you know, yeah.
It'll be new houses.
That's what, that's what.
It's a rezone deal, what I'm saying,
That goes
yeah.
to housing typically.
Gonna have
Oh,
to pay
no, let me
12,000 a
finish,
house.
let me finish my thought on this. Because people watching TV, and I just received a phone call dealing with somebody, like some of you may be getting phone call. The facts is, the facts is, that is a small piece. If you look at where your permits are being pulled, in Manatee County, they're out of FAR, which is great. But the impact fee study that's before us today would deal with issues that need to be dealt with. Now, I'm concerned about economic development and affordable houses too. But what I got to be careful of the fact, it's not like it's having this big major impact on District 2 north of the river, like I'm killing someone. We done approved a couple of projects since I've been here, but it's not burning down, moving, slum, and blight. So I'm being careful about what I do here because I've talked to quite a few people call me dealing with the impact because most people are misinformed like I am myself, and I have to ask the questions. So when you tell me 50% to 75% is basically keeping, it's lowering it, and then you just taking the same amount of revenue, I have to accept that since you're the consultant. I have to accept that in there. And so my whole thought on this issue here, no matter what we do, and I had the same concern that Commissioner Barr and everyone else has, the other incentives that we must go through with, hopefully, to make sure we continue to move forward. When I first met the county administrator, first time I ever met him in his office, and we went to talk, and I said, look, I need to tell you something, I don't trust government.
Even though you've been in it for 20 years.
That's correct. I said, wait a minute, now I don't trust government. They'll say one thing and don't do it. And so we're going to have to do a lot of things like Commissioner Whitmore mentioned when incentives and things like this and for this to work. But my thing was I was going to stick with the 50 or 75, but once you told me that you're decreasing and it stays the same, it don't make economic and business sense for me to stick with that status quo. And it puts me on a bridge by myself that I can't cross back over when I can't prove you wrong. And I would like the data too, but if I can't prove you wrong, I can't support anything least than what you just recommended. We just took away 10%. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. We're going to go to Commissioner Bustle, then we're going to take our break.
No, public comment?
We're going to talk about this at 1:30. We're not done.
Back at 1:30 and talk about this.
Maybe they can't come back.
We got to be back at 1:30.
We got to be back here at 1:30. Can we be back here at 1:30? Is there any problem? I'm looking back in the back office. Any problem in METV to be back here at 1:30?
I think we're good.
We're good. Okay.
Madam Chair, point of order. Since there's only one person that wanted even to make public comment, could we do our commissioners' comments after lunch and let that one person speak?
Well, we're not finished
'Cause-
yet. The mayor got
No, I know, but,
couple people.
oh, okay, well, I think there's only one person here to speak, a gentleman.
If you want to go to public comment, but I'm going to be leaving here by no later than 10 after because I have a lunch appointment.
Yeah, well, 5 after. He only gets
Yes,
3
3
minutes. Yeah.
Okay, you okay with that, Larry? Go on to commission comments. I had 3 of you on the board, so if y'all are okay with that.
Well, I'll stay
I'm
on the
taking
board.
off. I'm off.
Okay.
I'm off.
You okay, Larry?
The only thing I wanted to do is make sure I understood what Commissioner Ball was saying. The way you said it, I didn't think it was correct. You said you're not prepared to increase impact fees by 100%. Well, it's 100% of the recommended increase.
Right.
It's, or 80% of the recommended increase. It's not increasing impact fees by 100% or by 80%.
That's correct.
So as long as you understand that.
Some percent, isn't it?
I do understand it, and I thought I said that. If I
Okay.
didn't, I
All right,
apologize.
I think we're clarified. That's good. All right, we're going to go ahead and open it up for public comment. This is a workshop, so anyone can speak for 3 minutes to the issue at hand. So please come forward and just state your name for the record.
My name is, excuse me, David Craner. I'm chairman of the board of Manatee School for the Arts. And in a manner of speaking, I represent not just the 2,000 students and their parents of Manatee School for the Arts, but the other charter schools who are in negotiations right now with the school board. No one who's in politics likes to raise taxes, and I'm not so cynical as to believe that has anything to do with just the fact that it might affect your reelectability. It would do that too, but also because I think you have genuine concern for your constituents and their ability to pay those taxes. I don't think you want to. Fees, sorry, fees. But however you like to call it, the extra amounts of money that come out of individuals' budgets to pay for government. I think a lot of individuals are concerned more about how the money's spent than just the amount of money, so they want some transparency there. I came here because I want to make a point, and I don't want to insult any of you, but the amount of money that you control in this county is chump change compared to what the school board controls. And they can confirm this. If you add up all the cities in Manatee County and the county commission, you still don't get to the budget level that the school board controls. And yet they're coming to you to ask you to take the burden and the heat from raising impact fees so that they can get more money. Now, I know you need some too, but let's make it clear what's happening here. They're doing this because they've reckoned that there's no way that they can get the sales tax increase that they got a little while back reenacted, both because of the political climate of the day and because I've told them straight out, if we don't get a share of that, and we didn't in the past as charter schools, then we won't support it. And I can put together about 4,500 to 5,500 voters that will vote against whoever tries to do that and vote against that fee. So they know it's dead in the water. It probably wouldn't succeed even if I supported it. And quite frankly, I'm missing Glenn Beck and I'm about to miss Rush Limbaugh, so I'll tell you where I'm at politically. And for me to come up here and look at you and say, folks, I'm in favor of impact fees. And I know it's going to hit me to some degree, probably because of investments I make. But the truth of the matter is we've got to, food doesn't come from grocery stores, and roads don't come from just government paying for roads. Taxpayers pay for roads. If you want a road to drive on, if you want a school to go for, you got to pay for it. And I want to make sure I clarify here the difference between capital money and operating money. At Manatee School for the Arts, we spend a substantial chunk of our budget moving operating money into capital expenditures, legal. But you can't take capital money and put it into operating money. So I can use operating to build the building or capital to build the building, but when I want to put a new roof on it, I got to use operating money. And that's the point that Mr. Hunsaker was trying to make. As you get to bigger and bigger infrastructure over the years, what happens is the cost of having to maintain that comes only from your operating budget. Capital money's not going to solve that problem. You have to come up with some fees. I have a long list of fees. I can help you out. I know my time is up. Yeah, let's get together.
All right.
Oh, did I have to leave an address on the back of my business card? Because I've got to have that address. Is it blank on the back?
It says 700 Haven Boulevard, Palmetto.
That's charter school.
Was there a stamp on it? Okay. Get that to Ed, get with me. I want to talk to you guys. Thank you very much for
All
your
right,
time,
well-
folks. I really can help you out, and I'm on board for this. Pass this. Do it. It'll help you, Mr. Smith. It'll help your constituents. Believe me, it will.
Okay, well, thank you. And as I talked to you during the break, there is going to be much more conversation about revenue sources in the county. So
You did
it
pretty
is
good.
tough, so we appreciate it. Mr. Goff, you want to come forward?
So,
My name is Edward Goff. I'm a taxpayer and resident of Manatee County. And I believe that it would be unwise to charge anything less than the 100% allowed. You hired a company, a very reputable company, to tell you what you should do and how much you should charge. And my feeling is that if you charge less than that and your infrastructure costs more than that, which it is likely to cost anyway, where is that money coming from? It's coming from general revenue. If you don't have sidewalks in your area, it's because the money went to cover infrastructure that should have been paid by impact fees. The impact fees have been too low for too long. So keep that in mind. It's a very serious consideration. If you cut the impact fees, who's going to cover what the impact fees should have covered? So I am in favor of 100%. And what Mr. Hunsaker said earlier about the possibility of somebody messing up and making a bad calculation, I think that's a very remote chance. I don't know how long ago that was, but with today's technology, today's computers, today's software, I don't think that's very likely. And if it did happen, it wouldn't take 3 years to straighten it out because of our technology. So once again, 100% is what you really have to go with. If you don't, the taxpayers of Manatee County are going to have to make up the difference, and that is not fair.
Is he familiar with?
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. That's the last public person I see. Is there anybody else who want to make comment? Now be your time. All right, we're going to go ahead and close public comment. Mr. Hunsaker, you're on the board.
Thank you. Just let me clarify,
Please.
if you don't charge 100%, you will have taxpayers supporting this. The only way that would happen is if there was, in your budget process, a transfer from general revenue to the impact fee fund
Right.
to build something. We have never done that. What we've talked about, even during the recession, is living within our means. We will build what the revenue will support and build no more. But we will not, I will not, in a budget, transfer money from general revenue to the impact fee fund, because at this point in time, we have stress in the general revenue to even fund the government as we know it today. We had to disappoint the sheriff this year in his request because we didn't have enough general revenue to support it. We would even be in a more dire strait if we took general revenue / property taxes and moved that into the impact fee fund to pay for infrastructure. So I assure you that won't happen.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm going to cut this off. We can continue the discussion when we come back at 1:30 because we're going to need to probably continue the discussion. We're okay to be coming back here, is what I understand. Nobody's told me we're going to get kicked out. So we'll be back here at 1:30.
I may be 5 or 10 minutes late.
All right, we're going to go ahead and reconvene our work session. We were discussing the impact fee study, but before we get started, just want to note that we just came from the Braden and Kiwanis Veterans Day celebration, and we had over 50 county employees that were veterans that RSVP'd to come to the lunch. It was quite a celebration of veterans, quite a recognition. And our own Colonel Bussell was also recognized and got a standing ovation.
Yay.
So everyone was very glad to see that. So it was a really nice lunch. I'm sorry
Should be.
the rest of you couldn't make it. Anyways, we're talking about impact fees. Any questions, discussion? I imagine staff is looking for probably some sort of direction, maybe, even though we don't have to take action.
There's no action, oh, excuse me.
The mayor hat was last on, I believe. He
Yes, we'll go ahead and go to him and then go to the folks on the board.
I believe we've been requested to provide you some information. I think we can do that in short order, probably by the end of the week.
Okay.
Each of you will receive that information, and we're interested in any other thoughts you might have. Again, we're scheduled to be in front of the Planning Commission Thursday, and in December, coming back before the board. And when we come back before you, we'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. But any information that you desire that you haven't seen to date, we'll be able to provide to you. There's a lot of information, a lot of different levels. But I think you've seen the sum and substance of the impact fee required via the calculation, the recommendations for going at 90%. We can provide you a list of what it would be at other rates and how much revenue that would bring in as requested. So I think we understand the mission.
Okay, great. I got on the board Commissioner DeSabatino, then Commissioner Bussell.
No, I'm fine, thank you, that was from before.
Oh, was it?
Thank you.
Okay.
I just wanted to say that I was very encouraged by some of the comments made by my colleagues here on the dais about your non-hesitation to jump in and go for this. And I was encouraged by the two people that spoke to us from the public as well. And I just want to make sure that my comments were not mistaken. Just by asking about an 80, 85, 90, that doesn't necessarily mean that that would be my first choice. But if all else failed, then that was the only way we could proceed, then I could support that. But I certainly could support going with what the study recommended at the 100% level or 90, depending on what this board does.
I think that's the feeling of most of us. We want to see some more information, and then we're going to have to make a decision, and we have that. What item is it on the Planning Commission agenda? Just so some of us probably want to watch that. First on the Planning Commission agenda?
Yeah, I think it's up first, so.
I think that'll be educational for folks to watch as well, since they're looking at it from a different perspective.
You know, as I said initially, this is an art. We're at the stage we're at now. The science has already been done, and it's drawing that balance between the ability to fund the necessary infrastructure required by new growth versus putting a fee in place that could drive economic development and job creation outside of the county and an unintended consequence. So I don't think there's a wrong answer. and there's no absolute right answer. It's each of you understanding that there's a balance to be drawn, and where is that balance? Is it 90%? Is it 87.5%? Is it 94.2%? There's no right or wrong answer. We just need to go down the path. And if we see something happening in the marketplace that's an unintended consequence, you can always revisit the fee. As stated earlier by Mr. Clegg, you have the study. As long as you stay within the parameters of the study, you're safe to maneuver. You can always revisit.
All right, Robin?
And another red letter day, I completely agree with Commissioner Bustle, so we got 2 today. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
up to something.
Well, I think we're done with that topic. I don't see anyone else on the board. I don't think anyone has any other comments, so we'll be looking for some more information. And this comes back before the board on December
Do we have a plan the 3rd?
December 3rd.
3rd.
Third.
Good, good.
We'll have the results of what the Planning Commission has determined, and we'll visit with you, and we'll see what other comments are out there, because we continue to meet with the business community, the chambers, the EDC, other interested parties, and we'll come back with you with any additional information you may require.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioners.
All righty.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys, for being here.